Welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of the movie like the script. I'm one of the hosts, Bob Rose, and you can find me at Thundergrunt Bob on basically all the different 9,000 Twitter copies and Twitter itself and Instagram. I'm there. I'm everywhere. And now the other guys are going to introduce themselves, starting with, let's say, Jamie.
I'm Jamie Nash. I'm a screenwriter. I also wrote the book Save the Cat Writes for TV and the Save the Cat Beat Sheet workbook. I am still on Twitter as of this date at Jamie_Nash. Not Threads yet, though. Haven't made it to Threads.
I'm on Threads waiting for Jamie to
Yeah, I
join.
thought that was good. I thought Jamie had put a line in the sand that Twitter was his last social media stand, and he wasn't gonna.
It is. I'm barely on Instagram. I mean, I'm barely on there.
He's like J97523.
So listeners, start a petition. Get Jamie on Threads.
Yeah.
So I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant. My Twitter handle is at Jimmy R. George, and I am active on Threads now at _Jimmy George. So find me on there. It's been fun so far. And yeah.
I can vouch. I've seen him there. I barely look at Threads. It's in Jamie's defense. Okay, so if all the listeners have already seen the thumbnail and they're already like, why? So, yeah, today we're going to talk about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Two thes in the title. You're right. And before we get into our little personal blurbs, I was going to say, you know, we did a Facebook poll. I think it was Jimmy that you did it, Jimmy, where you asked our listeners that are more in our personal circles what they would like to hear from us in the future. And like 99% of those responses were them wanting us to do notably bad movies to like rip the ass out of them. And after that, you came to our chat and you were like, like, does everyone that listens to the show not understand what we are versus what we're trying to not be? So, you know, I had to bring that up because we're doing a movie that's notoriously disliked and that the internet has roundly destroyed more than, you know, we have any interest in doing. So yeah, I was just going to say, we're not trying to turn this into that podcast ever, even if we choose to do movies like this. And if you want cynicism, if you want that, Red Letter Media is on YouTube. Go to Reddit. I don't know. You can go a billion different places for that.
There's a treasure trove of options.
Right. We're not here to, you know, shit. We're not here to shit on movies because we don't love them. We love them and we're here to do something else. Okay. So I just wanted to say that because that poll bummed me out too, Jimmy.
Yeah, man.
Because everyone was just like, do this. We're like, you just
do Howard the Duck.
Right. I love Howard the Duck. So no.
Thought I'd pick another George Lucas thing there.
Right. But like everyone just wanted us to like crap on stuff. And I'm like, is that what we're giving off as a vibe? I don't think that is what we're trying to do.
But
we'll start another one where we just shit on everything. And Jamie will host that primarily. So okay. Let's go around before we get into the topics. Let's go around and say our personal relationship with this movie, which complicated, I know. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I'll save my. I gave a little indie spiel on the Raiders episode, so I'm not going to retread that. Maybe I will for Dial about how, you know, like the 5 beta tapes in my home that my father had.
Right.
And
we can just point them if you want to hear that. Just listen to the Raiders app.
It's one of the reasons, like, somehow the universe wanted me to be doing this fucking show and have me watch that over and over. But anyway, as far as Indy 4, so let's do it quickly. I was never a person who was not down with Indy with aliens. When I see people talk about this movie now, one of the common things is like, what does archaeology have to do with aliens? And like, there's a lot of people who complain about that not feeling like it's a good mix. And I do think that speaks to like genre expectations, right? Indiana Jones is its own genre. We talk about that a lot, and that's not on the talking points for today. Me personally, I fucking love the idea of an Indiana Jones X-Files episode if it was well executed. This in my, this is not, I don't take pleasure in shitting on the movie. Like I think we're here today to try to talk about what's not working, why it doesn't connect the way that the other. I think there's going to be a lot of just organic comparisons to the other movies as we talk, and I think that's telling because the other movies are like some of the most beloved movies in the history of cinema, and there's reasons for that that have nothing to do with just like the direction and the aesthetics and the performances, and are come back to the strength of the script. And this one is not doing a lot of the things that those do very well. I think this movie is very fun. I have a great time, but I also have to check my brain at the door like 10 times in this movie. And I think it has a lot of really basic story construction problems. And I think when we go into the development history, it's going to sort of inform why that is. Like the insane amount of cooks led to this stew that is like a goddamn mess. And even with all that stew, it doesn't even have the salt and the pepper.
Yeah.
It's like all this shit, the jambalaya, and they fucking didn't have the ability to just like add some salt and pepper. The basics. So yeah, I enjoy the movie, but I think we're going to talk about a lot of the reasons that it's not like as emotionally engaging as the rest of the movies. Yeah.
Cool. And also, I don't know if you heard George Lucas, but these are interdimensionals. They're not aliens.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
They're interdimensionals.
And that's on my history. I forgot that already.
It's in that interview clip.
Yeah.
They're interdimensionals. Jamie?
Yeah. So like Jimmy, I've talked Raiders of the Lost Ark as my favorite movie. I'm a big Indiana Jones fan. Love the first three movies. The thing that stands out about this one to me is our mutual friend of ours, Kevin Perkins. He used to get us into these press screenings.
I was with you, Jamie.
You were there.
With you.
You were there. That's why I bring this up.
We saw this together. That's kind of funny.
2008. You guys saw this together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's three screenings that stand out. I saw tons. In some ways, this great guy, Kevin, ruined movies for me, or at least going to the movies. So I got into all of them early. I got into all of them free, and I'd always go see them, like even if it was a movie I didn't really want to see. So I did this for like, I don't know, 10, 15 years or something.
This is how we know each other, Jamie, basically through Kevin giving us free movies.
Absolutely. So there's three that stand out to me. And I like more, this show to me is more about my personal history than anything else. You guys just do this other stuff. So the three screenings that stand out to me the most, besides the first one I saw was Sin City that he got me into, and he'd get you into ones a couple weeks in advance or something. Revenge of the Sith is surprisingly, and I don't think you were there, Bob, for that one. I
wasn't. No.
Okay. So Revenge of the Sith.
I don't think I knew Kevin at that time.
Really? So Revenge of the Sith was one that was super secret, and we had to come in through a back door, and there were like four of us watching the movie like a month in advance. So it just felt like I was in on some secret for that one. So I remember that one. Spider-Man 3 is the other one I remember. And did you see Spider-Man 3, Bob?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was at the screening.
The reason that one stands out is that was the only one that I went to that had unlimited concessions. You could get whatever you wanted. You could.
I think I remember.
My wife and I
got so sick.
My wife and I literally like stuffed our pockets with like snow caps just for the ride home. We were like, I like snow caps. I'll take 4 boxes. And you could do whatever you wanted. You get like the hot dog, whatever you wanted. Anyway, the movie wasn't great, but I was like amazed that they did that. You know, it was an unlimited concession. And then this one is the last one because I was such a big Indiana Jones fan, and I did see it a couple weeks in advance, and it was at the Senator, which all of these weren't. Some of them were at the Senator, like Sin City was at the Senator when I saw it, and other ones. This one was at the Senator. The only weird thing, it was like 11 a.m. or something, which
it was a very odd time.
Which was kind of horrible for it. I mean, the movie I didn't love anyway, but it was kind of like when you go see a comedy show and it's early in the day and it's just a bad crowd for comedy or a bad time for comedy. That's what it felt like here. Like we came outside and it was like, 1:00 or something. The sun was shining. It just was wrong. There was something wrong about the whole thing. But anyway, I proceeded to go across to like a diner across the street, or I guess they don't have a diner. I don't remember what it was, but I had like a coffee with a friend of mine, and I could not stop talking about this thing for like 2.5 hours. Just my negative reaction towards it. I really didn't like it. Yeah, everything about it, to me, it felt like somebody imitating Spielberg, almost like Spielberg had quit that one. Kind of how he quit this recent one. But it felt like he had quit that one. Lucas had quit, and they brought in some other jobbers, and they did their best to imitate, but they couldn't figure it out. Like they got it all wrong. Like the tone was slightly off. I thought Harrison Ford's acting was bad at the time. I didn't think it was very good. I know we're not supposed to talk about Dial, but when I watch Dial in this in comparison, he actually seems much better in that than he does in this. There's something about this one. And I blame
agree,
that,
having seen it. Yeah.
I blame that usually on directing, to be honest. It's usually like, I don't know, this movie, it feels like his voice is dubbed over a lot. Some of his dialogue's really weird. Like when he's talking to Shia, calm down, kid. It's like, what? Indiana Jones is like,
save your dancing for the dance floor, whatever it is.
Settle down, boy. It's like, I'm like,
dance on your own dime.
Yeah, it's really strange dialogue. So a lot of that I don't blame on Harrison Ford. And man, Marion really sucks, right? She smiles the whole time, like, hee hee, hee hee. We almost died, hee hee. And it's like, oh my,
yeah. I wish the audience could see Jamie's impression.
Right?
Yeah.
When the best,
His
when the
Joker smile,
when the best actor in a movie is Shia, and he by far, in my opinion. It's because they made Kate Blanchett seem kind of bad, and at least I feel like she's in on the joke. But what's the joke? I don't get it. So anyway, so those are all things we will not really be talking about too much about in this podcast.
Now.
Not in our talking points. That's what this moment's for.
That's what this is for.
And then CGI instead of stunts, and if you compare like the opening car chase to the monkey scene and stuff like that, it's just like, what is going on? It's like the creator, like I said, it feels like jobbers. They brought some jobbers in, kind of like they do now in this day and age. They bring 2 new hot directors in, they shove them on some IP, and they do something. It doesn't quite work, and they try to get some member berries kind of stuff going. It doesn't work. That's what this movie felt like to me.
Can work. It can work sometimes.
It can.
Rarely.
I'm saying in this one, it didn't work too well.
Yeah.
It was very, very like, I mean, I could go on with this. This sounds like my 2-hour rant that I went on before we even drove home, and I ranted for another 2 hours.
Been transported back to the coffee shop with the Dial of Destiny
14 years ago.
So anyway, I'll wrap it up with that. The only thing I will say, this might be the second or third time I've watched it. So I'm not sure that I really watched it since then. I kind of enjoyed it this time. Like I kind of liked it. But I had less than zero expectations. I mean, my expectations were -10, and I enjoyed it. It was kind of a okay watch for me on second watch, knowing the things that were coming, and also knowing the faults and the things I was confused about, being able to re-watch and re-examine them. I sort of enjoyed the second watch. So as much as I hated the first watch with a passion, this watch was not quite as bad. So
it's so funny. We saw it together for the first time at the same theater, Jamie, because like I feel like you just said a lot of stuff that I'm gonna say, because I'm younger than you, so I was even, when you're young, you're dumb and you're way overly worried about things that don't matter. So when I saw this movie with Jamie, when I walked out, I was way overreacting personally. I was like, because back then, you're young, everything. I was like, I felt like the three of my heroes had like betrayed me. I like, it's not the worst movie ever. I never thought that. The mediocrity of it was so insulting to me because indie back in that moment was so big to me. It was everything. I want to get into filmmaking. I want to talk about films. I want to be a part of it. They were responsible. These three men were responsible for a huge chunk of my love. And then I walked out of the Senator that day and I like drove home like a zombie. I don't think I even turned music on. I just was sitting there just like, how could this can't be? What just happened? No, that isn't the movie. I got to go see it again. I ended up seeing it 3 times. And I know that sounds nuts, but I had to confirm like what I had seen. I was that young and stupid and cared that much. I just felt so depressed.
I had a similar reaction with Phantom Menace. I think because Phantom Menace preceded this, I had already had that kind of hit. Like
of thing.
This was the second hit of that.
Yeah,
this is that second hit.
Yeah, my childhood is over basically after Phantom Menace.
Maybe that's what it was. It kind of woke us up. It was like, everybody's getting old.
Yeah, by this point, I was like, okay, this just confirms it. It's dead.
Well, yeah, so I was gonna say, I actually to counteract that, I don't want to live in the past too much here, but I did watch it again twice, and while I could complain forever in a manner that is not fitting this podcast, I did enjoy it way more. It's not this thing of absolute despise that I used to have for it. Like, for like 10 years there, it was this thing that I loathed and I wanted it to go away and I wanted Spielberg to say it doesn't count, So, and I realized I was young and stupid and I was acting like one of those people that hated the Last Jedi or something, like I was just like so mad about it. But now I actually kind of enjoyed this watch, but and I think in the wake of seeing Dial, as we're not supposed to talk about it, I enjoyed it more because I'm already forgiving for that, and then I'm forgiving for this. It's like whatever. Yeah. But I made to be fair, I made a list of 5 things I love and 5 things I hate. And these are not script things. So okay. I just figured I'd do this because when am I ever going to get to talk about this stuff?
Yeah, no, so, put it on.
And if you guys want to add anything. So I'm going to do 5 things I love. And they're just, some of them are just small things, like the shot of him picking up his hat in silhouette. It's a great moment. That's a Spielberg moment. That's like the moment that just like, okay, at least Spielberg is somewhere in this movie, Yeah. That's a beautiful shot. I love it. It's a great way to start the movie. I love the rocket sled gag. I thought that reminded me of classic Spielberg. It really did. And it's fun. It's actually funny. It's not cringy funny. It's actually funny. Plausibility aside, I don't care about the plausibility of it really, but I enjoy the entire nuke the fridge scene.
Me too.
It doesn't make any sense. He completely would be dead. It's fine, whatever. But I actually like the whole moment where he's realizing that he's about to the whole town's about to explode. Harrison's best acting in the movie is in that scene, in my opinion. And then the shot of him, once again, Spielberg shows up right at the end of that scene where it's him being welcomed into the nuclear age. That whole chunk, while it got the biggest ribbing to me, I'm like, but this is kind of like the best part of the movie in a weird way.
I'm cool with everything with that section except the gophers. I'm not a fan of the gophers.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. I hate and they don't come. That's a terrible setup and it's a terrible payoff. The gophers. I don't like them. I love Jim Broadbent's delivery and line. We've reached the age where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away. It's a great fucking line. It's just a great line.
Very, very thematic about Phantom Menace in this movie to me.
It really is like, it's like the whole movie is bad.
They should have put that on the poster.
This movie took something away. Yeah. Yeah, no,
that was the headline of my review back when it came out.
Okay, and last but not least, and this is my absolute favorite part of the movie, I think that the only time this feels even remotely close to the original 3 is the entire ant sequence.
Interesting.
I think that the horrors there, Indy fighting the Russian guy feels like old. It feels like for a moment Harrison is his, 80s self again. I think the execution of it is really funny and gross. The Russian's death reminds me of something from Temple of Doom, or even the death in the beginning, Alfred Molina's death, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like there's something about that sequence in the middle of all this stuff I cannot stand. I do not really like any of the jungle stuff for myriad of reasons, but that whole ant sequence to me, even though they're CGI ants, it reads as the original trilogy Spielberg for a moment. And I said that back 14 years ago, and it only reinforced it watching it for this show. So I really love that. I really think that's my favorite part of the whole movie. Also, I'm a Temple of Doom guy, so maybe that works itself into there somehow. Okay, 5 things I hate, and I'll keep this short, guys. I don't care about CGI quality. I don't care about those. Sorry, I'm not trying to discount what Jamie was saying, but it's not CGI.
I think it's the lack of stunts is the thing.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, he's old.
Comparing it to the Mission Impossible franchise, like we talked about,
like we just did. Yeah,
there's something that feels like Indiana Jones, the movie that kind of put stunts on the map.
And then to see it be sad like this, it's really depressing.
It's something's
but
up.
For me, as a more technical guy, the editing is slovenly as hell. Like, it is sloppy editing, and the compositing with the green screen, it's bad for 14 years ago. You can see the outlines on people, like they're all fuzzy and soft in so many shots. It's embarrassing for a Lucasfilm thing. Wow. It's not the CGI. It's the compositing and the editing that fail this movie. But I know that's more technical to talk about, but I loathe it. It's terrible looking.
It's your platform here to do it, man. Go for it.
And I have some experience
who works with the green screen. Yeah,
I have some experience with it, so I can say that. But it is really badly edited. There's a lot of shots where it goes from a wide to a close, and I'm like, man, his head was like the other way around. I'm just like, it's like really bad, like moment to moment continuity editing. This is, without question, John Williams' worst indie score, without even a moment of questioning. He doesn't show up for this movie. John Williams saved the prequels. He saved them single-handedly with some of his best work ever. We can all agree John Williams showed up for the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, it's like, where is he? Where is he? Could you remember? I mean, I remember the themes to all 3 of the originals.
The cues at all.
It's awful. He's like he was just coasting. He doesn't give a crap. It's
probably
terrible.
Telling of the material that was. Yeah. He was tasked with scoring, right?
Right.
They feed off of each other.
Right. Right. Totally. Yeah. Totally. Mac. We'll talk about Mac later. I think Mac's death scene. The execution of it, his line reading, and the entire thing is embarrassing. It's an embarrassing moment for Spielberg to even release a movie with that scene. Him with Indy throws him the whip, and I'm like, isn't there just a flight of stairs right there? Like, what is happening? He throws him Mac. He's just like, Mac, come on. I'm like, can he not walk? And then Mac says, Jonesy, I'm gonna be all right. I'm like, what is happening in this moment? It is embarrassing. It's one of the most embarrassing things Spielberg has ever put on film. It is truly terrible.
I actually think there's a lot of, I didn't put it on the talking points, but I actually think there's a lot of those little moments that we don't ever really associate with a Spielberg movie or a David Koepp. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Cap, I think it's Cap.
Script. Where there's this idea versus execution, where to your point, he's saying all that, and what's being conveyed is not clear at all, and there's a lot of that. Like
it's like 5 steps. Why
when she goes to his head? I don't even know. Like when we're supposed to see that she's got like a psychic with powers. I don't even know what we're looking at. It's just I can hold up my hand to any person, to you guys right now on the screen, and it's as much gravitas as the movie gives it, right?
Right. It's just like you expect, like kind of what Jamie said, like is Spielberg even alive here? Like, is he watching what he just put
Right.
out?
Well,
Like
and
that scene to me is very just indicative of it. You know, I'm just like, I'm
Mhm.
gonna be all right.
It'll be all right.
What are we doing? It's like
And
5 steps. This man just did all that stuff right next to Indy, and he just can't walk up 5 steps. I can't do it. I don't want to nitpick, but I just had to say I hate that scene so much.
Get it out of your system.
I got 2 more, and then we're going.
And then we're gonna be better.
I am fine with the implausible stunts, as we've said. I don't really care about the implausibility of them, but they fall the waterfall thing. I don't mind them falling off 3 waterfalls, but what bothers me the most is, and this should be Spielberg's fault. This should be a set designer thing. The car that they're in has a broken windshield, and the windshield is like a razor sharp blade in front of all of their heads, and they're diving down face first into 3 separate waterfalls. It's just like, I mean, guys, like I can suspend a lot of disbelief, but you know what I mean? Like that the fucking the windshield on the car bothers me so much. It's like literally a razor blade ready to decapitate all of them, and they're all fine. 3 falls in. I hate it. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
The last one, this goes with Jamie, and this is something I said to you guys personally. This movie straight up feels like a vacation. It feels like Spielberg was literally, and there's proof of it on video, literally peer pressured into the movie. And it ended up being like this vacation where he spent making something with all of his buddies. And because of it, the whole movie looks like a sitcom. And it does. The movie looks like it's shot on a soundstage. I don't even feel like there's a natural shot in the movie. The jungle looks embarrassing. Everything looks embarrassing, and the entire feel of the movie is just, we kind of wanted to hang out and shoot a movie on the side.
So what you're saying is the guy that on the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Spielberg that has 2,000 snakes, looks at it in the camera and says, "There's not enough snakes. I need you to get me 5,000 more right now." That guy is not there.
You ever heard
that guy didn't show up.
The Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a movie we haven't done. You know how Spielberg said when he got older, he wouldn't have had Richard Dreyfuss get on the ship because now he has a family, and the ending of that movie would be him staying with his family, making it an infinitely worse movie. I feel like that's the 2 Spielbergs, and this movie is the worst of the family man, older Spielberg. Everything bad about him being older and being a family man. It's like him having fun, and it's like a sitcom at the end of the movie when they're in it ends on like this sitcom shot of a brightly lit church. I'm like, is this like 4 weddings and a funeral? Is this Runaway Bride? What is happening to this?
I love that we're talking about this right after Jaws, where we just like bow to the altar of Spielberg.
He's still a legend, but he doesn't, he can make mistakes.
Jamie?
You know what it is to me? Now, there's 2 sides of it. One, everything you say feels like a movie that's rushed. It feels like, oh, they didn't have time to figure out the script. They didn't have time to do this. They had to shoot it really quick. It feels like a rushed movie. But I remember what I used to think about this movie was that Spielberg was trying to be who he used to be, as opposed to saying, I'm who I am now, and I'm going to make a different movie. So he was aiming at his old self and failing, as opposed to like what Spielberg, I think, would normally do, was like, I'm this guy, this movie's going to be different. And that's the part I think that was missing with Crystal Skull.
Interesting.
And that's an interesting juxtaposition to us bringing up Mission Impossible, because that's a franchise that keeps changing. You know what I mean? It kept changing until it got to where it was, whereas Spielberg was looking backwards. You know what I mean? Like,
or maybe he didn't want to, but he was sort of forced to when he agreed to do it, because all those interviews, which we can go into that in a second, he's sort of saying, "Yeah, I didn't really want to do this."
It's in his voice. It's in everything he said about the movie, and everything Jamie just said. He's kind of like, "I didn't want to do this, so I'm just trying to do what I did
it for
again."
my friend.
Yeah, I said the peer pressure. It's peer pressure. You can have peer pressure when spending hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, speaking of that, though, I mean, are you done with your list? Or
I'm done. I'm done.
So to jump a little bit into development hell, and we can also wrap box office and all that stuff into it. I think George Lucas is interesting as a guy who does want to change things up every movie. To his detriment sometimes, right? So I think in Indiana Jones, he did envision it as being a James Bond kind of franchise where they make one every couple years. I don't know, maybe in his head, they change up Indiana Jones every now and then or something. Not that he ever said that. But so Temple of Doom, when Temple of Doom came about, and George really was the guy who pushed the storyline, I think, or like, here's the big picture. He wanted to do a different genre almost than Indiana Jones was. Raiders was based on the serials, and Temple of Doom, he wanted it based on like Gunga Din and things like that. So it was slightly different. The genre was it was like a different subgenre. And in this movie, I think, and this speaks to some of the development hell, he wanted to make like Day the Earth Stood Still kind of movie with Harrison Ford. He didn't want to do back in. I can't say because I can't remember the actual script, but I'm not sure that he had him like running around the jungle and stuff like that.
He didn't.
Yeah,
I got the deets. Yeah, I got the details when we go into it.
So he wanted to flip genres movie to movie. He was like ready to, like, we did that one. Let's do this completely different thing. And yes, this Indiana Jones character appears, but now we're remaking a 1950s sci-fi movie. And
sci-fi movie.
Yeah,
yep.
And this movie gets compromised for various reasons. Independence Day, I remember, is one of them. Into this movie, like they kind of keep the MacGuffin, they do some stuff, but then it kind of gets compromised back to like the old thing they were doing before. And the weird thing is, in Lucas's world, the only movie that really shifted it the way I think Lucas likes to do is Temple of Doom. It's like Raiders came out, Temple of Doom shifted it to this weird thing.
And Last Crusade is like back to the basics.
Last Crusade is back. This one's kind of back with a different MacGuffin, but really it's the same type of story. It's a jungle, blah, 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 same settings. And even the new movie to an extent.
Yeah, I deleted it off this list, but when I was doing this research that I'm going to read my book report in a minute or two, I found out about after Temple of Doom was done, Lucas hired Chris Columbus, who had just written Goonies. So there's your timeline.
Yeah.
So Spielberg loved Columbus, and Lucas was like, let's get, do you know that? Do you know that one? That's the haunted house one. And he had him. So to your point, Jamie, to your point, like Lucas wanted Indiana Jones fighting ghosts in a haunted house.
And that's what I was trying to say. It's like two best friends that had completely different concepts, but have to do it together. And you know what I'm saying? And I think the one thing you can say is that Spielberg said goodbye to Indiana Jones really hard twice. And then we all had to say goodbye to Indiana Jones now 3 times. There's been a war within this franchise.
Yeah,
since the
within the creators.
You know,
parents, like really.
Yeah, Spielberg wanted to say goodbye, man.
Right. And also, I mean, Harrison Ford gets credit for pushing this movie.
Right.
Crystal Skull. Here's the one thing I will say. The one thing I always defend Lucas with, because everybody hates him so much and he gives him
I don't hate him.
I know, but there's so many, the world kind of, the zeitgeist is kind of, there's a certain, it's coming around now, I think, since somebody else owns Star Wars and stuff. But the one thing I always appreciate about Lucas's movies, even the prequels, those prequels, he's always giving you new stuff.
And absolutely.
He makes a point of it. Whereas if you look at all the new Star Wars, it's like, well, what is this franchise? It's the old stuff. And they're all constantly just trying to find new versions
the old stuff,
of the
old but worse.
Yeah. But, whether or not he was giving you pod races, weird government stuff, the two-sided lightsabers, whatever he was doing, he was always trying to give you some new
midichlorians.
That's what I mean, to his detriment at times, because sometimes it's like, okay, let's rein it in. It's getting too wide. But
I appreciate it, though. I appreciate the swings.
Yeah, I do too. That's the one thing about Lucas, I think, that goes underappreciated. If you look at Empire, Return of the Jedi was the only one that kind of looked backwards, but he still gave you like weird Jabba the Hutt stuff and all that kind of stuff. He gave it Ewoks might have been the wrong decision, but there was nothing like that in the earlier movies. So
disagree.
What was like that? Jawas?
I love the Ewoks.
You disagree with whether or not you like it or not. I see. But
I know. I'm just kidding.
My point with Jedi is he gave you the Ewoks and it was different. You might hate it, but he tried to give you the Ewoks. So
I think what's odd is most people that would argue that they want new stuff in Hollywood, but they always would say he's terrible for doing stuff like that. It's this odd dichotomy, you know. I appreciate at least he tried, you know.
Jamie, you want to do the box office and then I'll do my book report because I'm itching to do it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
We also didn't. I didn't ask the question even yet.
Who
wrote
Bob?
this shit? Who wrote this shit? Jamie.
Bingo.
Right.
Yeah. So the writers on this, I shouldn't
credited
trust
writers.
them.
Wait, which it leads into your development.
Yes.
Hell.
Yeah. It's David. Did we decide it was Kep?
I think it's
shame
Cap.
on me.
I'm positive it's Cap.
That's how I always say it.
Did
We talk about this on Jurassic Park.
Yeah, Jurassic Park. Yeah, I was gonna say. Did we do his background in Jurassic Park? Yeah.
And then story by, and he was like the hot writer during this time. Like he was the go-to guy. And then George and Jeff Nathanson get the story by credit. So let me just go back to give you David.
Yeah, and Jeff
super quick. Yeah.
I was going to say Jeff Nathanson. We also have done a Jeff Nathanson on this podcast script. Do you know which one it is without looking? Because I didn't. Speed 2.
Oh, man. It all makes sense.
No, he also wrote Catch Me If You Can, and his resume is fantastic. But his second credit is Speed 2.
Yeah, and Kep has been all over, our podcast, Jurassic Park. He has a story by in the original Mission Impossible, so it goes all the way back. I'm completely skimming through them. Carlito's Way is one of his, Spider-Man, Panic Room, Jurassic Park, of course. Just all kinds, War of the Worlds. So he kind of became Spielberg's action guy for a little while there. That all of his action stuff would kind of go through him. He did recently, I mean, this isn't that recent, but Angels and Demons. He did the Mummy screenplay, the Tom Cruise Mummy.
The Tom Cruise one.
Yeah.
He did Dial of Destiny. He gets a written by in Dial of Destiny. So there you go.
How about that?
He's definitely made some mistakes. Let's say that. No, I know people I actually know people who viscerally hate David Koepp as a screenwriter.
Jeez,
so,
wow, that's harsh.
I don't, but I know people that do.
He's written some fantastic screenplays.
I guess they hate Jurassic Park, I guess. I don't know.
I think I have one friend who hates him that said Jurassic Park works despite him.
Oh, they hate Jurassic Park, Spider-Man, and Panic Room.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I don't know.
Jeez.
I mean, he's got so many.
I've seen it on the internet, too. I've seen people, like, crap on him.
That is bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, what can you do? The Mummy was pretty terrible, but...
Yeah.
Jamie, how much money did it make?
Sorry.
Jamie can do his listing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it made 790 million worldwide.
That's incredible for back then.
Whoa!
Mm-hmm. And then
how did we not get more, even if it sucked?
Well, it also has like I didn't look this up, but I'm pretty sure on Rotten Tomatoes it's like 78 or 79. So it's not like hated like you'd think it would be. As far as critics go,
almost $800 million. I had no idea.
And
wow.
And over half of that came worldwide because 317 domestically. It was third place that year. The Dark Knight was number one at 530 domestically. Iron Man was 318, so the world was changing. So it and Iron Man
capsule.
It and Iron Man were neck and neck. Which is kind of amazing that Iron Man made that much money in some ways because it was the first.
It's weird too to think Iron Man made that and then look what happened. And this made that much money and then all those guys couldn't figure out how to keep doing it.
Because they probably didn't really want to do it very much in the first place.
If Spielberg just detached himself from this franchise, it would have been such a different history.
So interesting.
And then to round that out, Hancock was 4. That's surprising.
Hancock.
Wally.
Hancock.
4? Wally was... Hancock
5.
made more money than Wally?
Wally?
Yep. Why didn't we have Hancock 2? Where's our Hancock 2? Wally.
Do you remember the third act of Hancock?
I don't. I've never seen it.
Oh
The,
man,
the first 30 minutes isn't bad, and then it's
pretty
like
good. Yeah, it's
it's
pretty
a
good.
little worse and a lot worse.
I love
Kung
that
Fu
we're 40
Panda,
minutes into this
We're
episode
talking
talking about
yeah,
Hancock.
I think that's
Madagascar,
the perfect review of Kingdom of the Crystal
yes,
Skull.
and then we have Kung Fu Panda, Madagascar, Escape to Africa, and Twilight,
Oh,
Quantum of Solace, and Horton Hears a Who. So a lot of animation up there.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, wow.
it's weird because even the things beneath it, it's like Sex and the City, Mamma Mia, The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, The Incredible Hulk, Wanted, Get
Wow, all the way
Smart
down
is at
there.
16, Juno, Four Christmases, Tropic Thunder, and Bolt. They're our top 20. There you go. That's my list.
man,
Time capsule.
I can't believe how much money this movie made.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was
had
that
no
high.
idea it was that.
I didn't know it was that high.
That's
Is that
very
with inflation, Jamie? Are these with inflation?
No, that they're the regular.
So it's almost 800 mil globally without inflation factored in. That's incredible.
Yeah,
Man.
I mean, the number. What did I say? Third biggest movie domestically of that year.
If Harrison Ford was so enthusiastic, why did it take 14 years? You
He
would think
wasn't, though. He
wasn't?
wasn't. I'm going to tell that story.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't.
All right. Well, yeah, that we're in our talking points now, and this one leads right into the thing you wanted to talk about, which was development hell.
Yes, I did my deep dive for this because I knew it had a storied history.
Oh,
and
by the way, one last thing in regard to budget. The budget was $185 million. So back then, that was probably expanding on one of the most expensive movies of the year.
Yeah, holy shit.
So even though it made a ton of money,
and Dial continues that tradition, right?
It does.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Okay, back to you.
So this this movie had a very storied history to get to the screen that goes way back. So for your history lesson, Last Crusade was 89. And as Bob said, Spielberg was done. Like, he had him ride off into the sunset on purpose.
In that clip, he says, I had them do that.
Yes.
He's on camera admitting all of this.
and Bob, Jamie, interject if you have
sure
stuff you want to add, because if some of you have read some of this stuff, just interrupt with your own side things, because I'm gonna go down a list and read a lot. It's but I think it's all relevant to what ended up,
to how we got here.
Yeah, how we got here. Yeah. So in 89, Spielberg was done, but Lucas and Harrison Ford wanted to do more. Like, Harrison Ford was going everywhere. There's all these clips of Harrison Ford going on every talk show and saying, I'd play him again in a heartbeat. Sign me up. Tomorrow, I'd go to set and play Indiana Jones if the project was right. And so was Lucas. So Lucas spent years trying to come up with the next MacGuffin. And that's why I'm setting up the MacGuffins for us to talk about later. He was like really having a hard time coming up with a MacGuffin that did those things, Jamie, that gave him sort of a story engine to put a bunch of new stuff in and take it in a new direction. And during the development of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, so for anyone who doesn't know, if you've been living under a rock, there was a TV show that got done instead, because he was still all into this, right?
Right.
So he didn't get his movies, but he got to do the TV show. And during the research for the TV show stories, he discovered the legend of the Crystal Skull. So that was for an episode of, they were going to do the Crystal Skull as an episode of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
I wish they did and got it over with there.
So that's where it started, right? And he was like, holy shit, this is the one. He pitched it to Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford was like, no way, dude. Like, this has nothing, in Harrison Ford's opinion, has nothing to do with like archaeology, but like in Lucas's opinion, and in my own opinion, like, they were adjacent, right? They went together. There's lots of legends of of old societies that had alien influence in building. It fit in Lucas's opinion. It fit.
It's still about stuff that happened thousands, hundreds of years ago.
And ancient cities, right?
Yeah.
So, but Harrison Ford just told Lucas, if you can get Spielberg in, I'll do it. but I don't like it. So then for 18 years, Lucas was playing around with figuring out how to get this working from there on. So the first official draft of Indy 4 was in 1994. Harrison Ford became friends with Jeb Stewart, who wrote Die Hard, because he was the writer of The Fugitive. So he told Jeb Stewart all about what they were going to do. He got Lucas to hire Jeb Stewart, and in 1994, Jeb Stewart took all of Lucas's ideas, and wait till I list them because they're kind of like amazing. And the first draft was Indiana Jones and the Saucerman from Mars.
It's a great title. Especially, I love it.
Are you ready for this? 1994, pre-Independence Day. It included all the ideas Lucas wanted. The mystery was centered around the crash in the Roswell. That was like the beginning of the movie. The Roswell crash is how the movie started. The government at the Roswell crash found a crystal skull and took it to Area 51. There's Russian villains who want to steal it. There's a CIA double-crossing agent who's friends with Indiana Jones. There's flesh-eating ants in the desert, not in the jungle, in the desert. Indiana Jones gets married at the end, not to Marion. That comes later. There's a flying saucer chase through canyons. There's 7-foot-tall aliens whose heads open up and they're piloted by little aliens inside their head. Men in Black. There's a full-on alien invasion of the U.S. that's like the off-screen movie, and the U.S. Army in the desert is annihilated by alien saucers. And in the end, the aliens get the crystal skull back and they leave Earth. So he basically wrote like Indiana Jones Independence Day.
They could have capitalized on all of that in the 90s. Because the alien movies in the 90s were huge.
Right. It was huge. Okay, huge. So in 1995, Jeffrey Boehm, who wrote The Last Crusade, also wrote The Lost Boys, a movie we're going to talk about at some point in this podcast, was brought on to do rewrites of Jeb Stewart's script. That script, the Jeffrey Boehm one, is out there. If you type in Indiana Jones and the Saucerman from Mars, the first thing that comes up is a PDF of this script. So if anyone's listening and wants to read it, Jeffrey Boehm did a rewrite. And the one thing he really truly added is Lucas wanted that rocket sled sequence added to the script.
Jimmy, you cut out for a sec. Say it again.
So you can read that script online, and the one big change was Lucas wanted that rocket sled sequence that's still in the movie today. All the way back in 1995, Lucas wanted that rocket sled sequence added to the script, so they added that in. But then in 1996, Independence Day came out, and Spielberg told Lucas, shut down the project. Kill it. Because it had so many similarities that Independence Day killed Indiana Jones and the Saucerman from Mars.
So it's their fault, huh?
So Lucas then pivoted to the Star Wars prequels. But he told Spielberg, there's like tons of articles out here, so I got this from a lot of different sources. But he told Spielberg, if we ever do Indy 4 again, it's going to be aliens, dude. And so Lucas did the Spielbergs, and in 2000, so this is like all like crazy timelines. In 2000, Spielberg, George Lucas, Frank Marshall, and Harrison Ford got together for the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award gifted to Harrison Ford. And to your point, Bob, they had a great fucking time. They were like, we love each other. This is a vacation. Let's make another one. So that like hangout party session at the AFI reignited all. Like Harrison Ford's like, let's do it. Spielberg's like, let's do it. George Lucas is like, let's do it. Everybody was in.
Before you keep going, can I point out something that I find odd too? Is that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the development of it and everything is about aliens in the 50s and all that. And it's like age appropriate for Harrison Ford at the time it was made.
Right.
And it's odd to me that he wanted to do that in like 94 when it wouldn't have been at all age appropriate.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Because he would only have aged for 4 years, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's odd that they would have done the 50s and make him like, hey, he's 20 years older, but he looks exactly the same.
That is so really interesting. But yeah, there. And the other thing was The Mummy had just been a huge success.
Yeah.
So they felt like if they made another Indiana Jones, there would be an audience interest in it because The Mummy checked a lot of those same boxes.
And The Mummy has since turned into a younger generation's Indiana
Pretty
Jones.
much,
Yeah,
right?
it really has.
So George Lucas, after that meeting, that was when George Lucas said, "Okay, I know you don't want to do aliens, but what if they're interdimensional beings?"
Which, can I just say to the audience, I don't think that ever made a damn difference.
No.
I don't think it ever moved the needle for literally any person buying a ticket. I don't think it did.
That interview you quoted, you sent us. I wish I had the link of where it was an easy link to link the listeners, but where Steven Spielberg said, "Okay, well, what do they look like?" And he's like, "Well, they look like aliens."
That's why it doesn't work. It's because they look like Spielberg's aliens.
Yeah.
It's just like doesn't read at all.
Okay, so after that, yay. So this is 2002. Lucas hired Frank Darabont. I don't feel like we need to explain his career, but basically Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, and most important.
Have we done Shawshank? We haven't done Shawshank.
We haven't done Shawshank. It's on the list.
Okay.
He wrote 5 episodes of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and he and George Lucas had worked together before in the past. And, he had been the ambassador of Indiana Jones 5 times. Even though it was for TV, it's still, he was happy with his work. So he hired Frank Darabont and Lucas, to do a new draft of the alien concept. And Lucas then asked him to bring back Willie Scott. So she was going to be the female lead. In the other scripts, in the older scripts, there's a new female lead. Darabont said, "No way, Marion Ravenwood is the love of his life. And if he's going to get married in this script, it's going to be Marion." And so Darabont was the one who was like, "Let's bring back Marion." And so that's what happened. In the end, Spielberg was fucking thrilled with the script and Lucas hated it. So they were like, "That's it." And then there's like great I don't want to shit on George Lucas, but if you look it up, there's some great quotes from
Jimmy. We have a Star Wars episode where we roundly praise Lucas for like 2 hours. So
where Frank Darabont basically, if you look up these interviews with MTV, if you just say Frank Darabont MTV interview, he's like, "Yeah, George Lucas is a lunatic." I told him to his face. So after that, Lucas did a polish of Darabont's script and changed the name to Indiana Jones and the City of Gods. And I believe that's probably what you guys have read. That's a script that's out there very widely.
Yeah.
It's got Darabont and George Lucas's name on it.
That's definitely the one I've read. That's the one I've read.
I read it
Gods. 14 years ago, but I read it. Yeah.
But supposedly that has most of what was in the previous scripts, just with Marion added. And all of these scripts, by the way, had Henry in there. I'm getting to that. The dad was always in these scripts, always, like fighting alongside of him. Then they hired Jeff Nathanson, Speed 2, Catch Me If You Can, what we just saw, to do another draft, and that was called Indiana Jones and the Atomic Ants. Spielberg was happy, wanted to get ready. Lucas said no. So then David Koepp, or however we said was hired, and he pitched, Indiana Jones in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, he wanted to keep the story world consistent, even though it was the TV show that like not a lot of people had seen.
Right.
And he was like, in the show,
it has old Indy in it.
Yeah,
right?
He's like, in the show when he's old, he's got a daughter that's a teenager. Let's bring her into this. Let's make her a character in this movie. And Spielberg was like, "I did the teenage daughter in Lost World. I don't want to do that again." And so he was like, and so David Koepp was like, "Well, we'll make him a son. Okay, like let's make him the son. He'll have a teenage son." So after all these additions, then you have David Koepp coming in and saying, "We'll make him a son." And so
angers me so much about all the stuff you're saying. Not once has anyone said anything about Short Round. Oh,
I know.
It angers me.
Well, if you in the Saucerman, he's at the wedding.
Okay, but that's not what I'm talking. He should be an active character in the whole movie.
I looked at the script because I wanted to see how it ended, and the Saucerman script ends at the wedding. just like the current,
just
the
like
final
this.
ones. But Short Round is there, Marion's there. It's like it's the denouement for the whole
Of the
series.
whole franchise,
Everybody's
yeah.
there in the church.
But
And
it's odd to me that he's never talked about as like bring him in.
I know,
Why?
man.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
It's so lame.
This movie is so overpacked with people. This one, that the end game of what we're talking about, it's like, it's even more insulting. Anyway, go ahead.
This is my last thing. So anyway, David Cupp wrote 3 drafts, and it was called Indiana Jones and the Destroyer of Worlds. The last step was
That's a great title.
Yeah, and the Destroyer of Worlds. Spielberg was happy, Lucas was happy, so the last step was getting Sean Connery involved. And you would have thought they would have done that first, right? So they gave Sean Connery the script, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't want to do it." And so they had to do another draft and cut out Sean Connery from the whole thing. And just have him killed off before the movie started. And so that's the backstory to the
Refresh
mess
my
that
memory.
we got.
Did he pass away after Kingdom?
Yeah, way after. Yeah.
Way
years
after.
later.
I honestly couldn't remember that.
He only passed away a few years back.
Yeah, it was only a few years ago.
So I felt like giving that history, showing all those cooks, and I don't know if you guys actually looked at the PDF I sent you. So I sent Bob and Jamie a copy of the shooting script that's out there. And this shooting script for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is available directly on David Koepp's website. So you can download that PDF right from there. And on the cover, it has all of these people's names on the official shooting script cover. But the WGA, whatever happened in between, only credits a couple of them. So I'm fascinated by that we've talked about that in the past, how the WGA decides who gets the credits. But all of these cooks, it informs the mess, right?
Right.
So anyway, thanks for letting me do the book report. I
think that's important.
It informs so much of what we see.
It's the explanation for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. More than anything we're going to say, that explains what made me and Jamie so mad all those years ago. You know? Okay. So let's talk about the why here, why now.
Yeah, so I'll introduce it. And I kind of want to go. I don't really have anything on this. I just kind of want to bounce around and talk about the why here, why now of the other movies and compare them to this. So, David Mamet. It's David Mamet, right, Jamie? I'm getting this reference right. Okay.
Yeah.
So David Mamet has this great prompt that when he was the showrunner for The Unit. He put out this mission statement because he was very unhappy with the way that the writers were delivering their material. And it had this long list of basically, it was sort of like writing rules, like for the show, like if you're going to do an episode, you got to do these things. And one of his prompts was, why does this scene have to happen here? Why does this scene have to happen now? And if you're able to answer those 2 questions, it gives the scene instant sort of story DNA. And, it organically creates that like goal, stakes, reward, obstacles, urgency, right? But what I've found is that prompt is even more powerful of a question to ask yourself for your concept, right? Like, and like a lot of times when I'm reading a script, right off the bat, the reason it doesn't work is from a conceptual standpoint. The why here, why now is kind of like boring. It's not compelling, right? And so I wanted to kind of compare, like, I'm putting a flashlight on your face, Bob, but if you were to describe the why here, why now of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, how would you say that? Why does it have to happen here? Why does it have to happen now?
Well, Jamie's the Raiders guy.
Raiders. Okay, Jamie. Like
Jamie do the
Raiders lens.
And why here? Do we mean that almost like in combination? Like, I'm not sure that the why here is a little odd, but I know he asked that. Like, I'm not sure if that's a location or like why here, like in this scenario.
It's
or
almost
situation.
like it's almost like a scenario. It could be,
but nonetheless, it's so the Nazis are looking for this, the Lost Ark, and the Nazis are going to find it, And it has to be Indiana Jones because he's the one that's worked with Ravenwood about the headpiece and the Staff of Ra and stuff like that. So you have a why now, because if Indy doesn't do it now, the Nazis will win and get the thing, and maybe it'll be a weapon and destroy the world. And why here? Why with Indiana Jones? Because he's the one that knows about it. He's the closest thing that the U.S. has to an expert on the particular
Exactly.
object.
That's perfect. Bob, do you think you could handle the Holy Grail one off of memory? If not, I'll do it.
I thought you were going to give me Temple of
I'm
Doom.
skipping Temple because it's a little different.
It is a little
Temple's
different.
a little weirder. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's not a good example for this.
Yep.
Well, for Crusade, it's the Nazis are pursuing it, right? The Nazis are pursuing the Holy Grail,
But
and
the father part is.
I was gonna the personal aspect of it is his father's been kidnapped. He has to find his father. That's what's inciting Indy to move.
That's
right. That's even in the movie.
That's the urgency. Yes.
When the Grail guy even says like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm looking for my father."
That is informed in the lock-in. That creates the whole the log line scenario. He's locked in that Donovan meeting where he has him read the piece, and it has all the details, and then he's like, I'll go into that later. But yeah, so you have
in the end, if he didn't have to look for his father, the Nazis might have found the Grail, and if they actually did, they still couldn't. They could have gotten it out. They could have never used it, right? So
now asking yourself,
the key thing the why now does is they can't give up and they can't wait. They can't put it off for a month. I'll do it next week.
Yeah, it can't be. His dad could die.
Yep.
And they can't quit because the Nazis will win the war. His dad will die, something like that. That's the key thing. The why here, why now does.
The children won't be returned to the village.
That's right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's good with Temple of Doom. That's a good.
Also, their crops are dying.
Their crops are dead, man.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's just,
it has to be done now, or people will.
Yeah, there's human interest in there. But ultimately, he's driven. We're going to get into that later by fortune and glory. But so with this one though, the why. What is the why here, why now from Indy's standpoint, from Indy's perspective?
It's very muddled. It's very muddled.
His friend is sort of missing. His sort of friend is sort of missing.
Mm-hmm.
And
a kid he doesn't know asks him for help
because his mom is missing too, and he doesn't know his mom and his perspective.
He's married, so thus it doesn't count. It doesn't count until he finds out way later. So
go ahead, Jamie.
Here's something else though. I was scanning the script before we came on. I was actually scanning for something else, and I found a spot where it talks about like something about it would be the kind of find a politician couldn't ignore. Did you see that? Was that in the movie, by the way?
I don't think so.
So the very last thing he says before they embark on the journey in the script is something about it would be the type of find a politician couldn't ignore. And I was wondering if they were trying to set up a why here, why now, as if he's been ostracized by the government, because that whole thing is just dropped. The whole you're fired.
Man.
And
you're
fired.
Doesn't
even matter.
And
it doesn't even matter.
When I looked at that one line in the script, I was like, maybe that's what they were trying to set up, is that he was really doing it because he needed the attention. He needed leverage against the government or something, or it could be his way to get back to his position in his job or something like that. And then I was like, is that line in the movie? And I was like, I don't think it's in the movie.
I don't think it is, Jamie. I literally watched it last night and this morning. So
it's a really odd line. It's like literally the thing that he says before they go off on the montage, the travel montage in the script. So it might have been, it might have been something that was in there and then people didn't understand it anyway. So they were just like, let's get rid of it. It's kind of confusing. It's a really weird, even the way the line is written is weird.
You know what makes it worse too is the whole I think him losing his job and then him making plans to go and find another job. I think the argument for the screenwriter would be that now he doesn't have a job, so he's looking for adventure to get into. That's not that very good either.
Yeah,
but for me, it makes it worse because I'm like, I don't think he would care at this point in his life about this kid or this guy he sort of knew or whatever to go on this adventure. It's very awkward. Like, what does him getting fired have to do with any of this? It doesn't play into the story, really.
Just to give you an example, in the PDFs, this is the shooting script. I just looked it up. Indy says, and this is the scene when they're back at the room debating, Nazca lines and blah, 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 and this and that. So then he says, Akatar, that would be the find of a lifetime. Indy moves to the bedroom. Create a reputation no politician could touch. That's his line.
Yeah.
That's not in the movie.
Not
in the movie.
I was like, this is a weird Indiana Jones line. I'm like, this is really strange. And then the next
that's
scene
also like Indy from Temple, from Fortune and Glory Indy. That's not Indy we should know now.
Right. So I wanted to ask you guys. So the reason I'm bringing this up, I'm bringing all this up to open up a bigger conversation. I was going to talk about this later, but it feels like this is the right time to talk about it. It's not really on the talking points. And that is the call to action, right? And Jamie, you want to sort of set up the call to action a little bit? Now I'll share the call to action here, the actual what we see, what's measurable here.
So a call to action is typically the moment that takes the character from their ordinary world, and it starts to hint at the upside down world of Act 2. So wherever direction the movie is heading, it's the first thing that takes them from kind of ordinary world to that, and it brings them in the fold. So, in the last podcast when we talked about Jaws, it was when they found the body on the beach, when because that
something
takes
has
the hero
to be done, right?
Yeah, it's in Raiders, it would be when the FBI agent showed up and said, "Hey, what do you know about the Lost Ark?" That would be the first moment. That'd be the kind of call to action, the catalyst.
Yeah, the FBI shows up. For comparison, the FBI shows up to your office, and they're like, "We've gotten word that Hitler has discovered some legendary supernatural weapon of mass destruction. And what we're being told is that this thing is real. And if he gets it, he's going to take over the world. First of all, is it real? Second of all, can you find it for us before he does?" That's a call to action, right? Like, that changes your entire life, right? And then you get called to a meeting, and there's this tablet in the office, and you decipher the tablet, and it says it's basically instructions to find the Holy Grail, and if you drink it, you will become immortal. And then, by the way, this guy who brought you into the office says, "We want you to lead the mission because your dad was leading the mission, and now he's disappeared." That's a call to action. Here, he's sitting at the bar. He just lost his job, and he's gonna move somewhere. He's like, "Maybe I'll teach somewhere." He's like, "I don't know." And, like, some random guy, like, drives by him on the train on his motorcycle, and he's like, "Hey, you know this guy Ox?" And he's like, "I haven't seen whoever you're talking about in 20 years.
Well, and then it cuts to them being in the thing. And for me, I'm like, I don't think Indy at that point would have gotten off the train.
Right.
I don't even see him, like, I think he'd be like, "Yeah, I remember him. I gotta go, kid." I just don't understand.
Forgiving that. They're sitting at the bar. We get this. I was going to talk about this in the exposition stuff later, but we get this backstory about Ox, who he sort of seems like he cares about Indy. He's like, "Yeah, Ox was a great guy. He's a cool guy." Like, and then we get this backstory about the Crystal Skull that Indy is measurably disinterested in. He's like, the Crystal Skull is, it's just, who cares about the Crystal Skull?
Yeah, that's stupid thing.
That's stupid thing. He gives a shit.
And then
the audience is like, "Yeah, we don't give a shit about it."
And then he gets the Akator, and he's like, "Yeah, Akator is a waste of time. I tried to find Akator. I got typhoid, and fuck Akator. I don't care." Like, he literally basically says, "I don't care about Akator either." Then Mutt's like, "Oh, by the way, my mom, this lady that you've never met," in his mind, "she's kidnapped." And he's like, "What's your mom's name?" "Mary." "Okay, well, that sucks too." And he's like, "Will you help me?" This, like, call to action.
Okay, I know I just watched it, but it's kind of, who told him to go to Indy again? Who
his
told
mom and Ox,
his mom.
double. Yeah,
His
his mom
mom
wrote a
Told
letter.
him to come.
He says something along the lines of like, "My mom said if anybody could find it, it would be you," or
Right.
something. And
Now,
also, there's
It's really
another thing.
terrible that he wouldn't inquire who his mom is more.
So this is. I wanted to bring all this up because of the.
There's
Go
one
ahead,
more
Jamie.
thing, though. There's one more thing that they throw in there, and it's like, why did they even wasting our time? Like, it's all this nonsense, and then they throw in, they must have let your mother go, and she mailed the message, so I will translate it. It's like, what are we doing here? I don't. It's so like, and they're doing it all in dialogue. You know, it's like so confusing. It gave me a headache.
So I kind of want to throw something out there and see what you think. I think what the audience, the filmmakers believe is happening. Because here's the thing. We've seen the trailers. Everyone knows it's Marion. Like, we have superior position in that moment. That he's talking about Marion Ravenwood because we've seen the trailers. I think they assume people watching feel tension there because like I can see the boardroom meeting, right, where you're talking about this and you're making the choice to do this, and you're like, everybody's gonna be like, oh, how long is it gonna take for him to realize it's Marion, and what's gonna happen when he realizes that it's Marion. But since Indy doesn't give a shit about this woman, it like robs it of all of that call to action power, right? Like,
I'm also saying, like, if he said my mom sent me, he would go, who is she and what's her full name?
Yeah.
That not happening is awful. That's awful writing. He's an archaeologist, a smart man. He would ask that simple question, would he not?
No, wait a minute. He says there were a lot of Marys, kid. And then
he did say that.
And then
he does say that, but
then Mutt
how does
flies
her
off
last
the
name
handle.
go up?
When Mutt flies off the handle, it says, "Hey, that's my mom."
Hey, that's my mom.
Calm down. So he sees it's a sensitive topic. He doesn't want to get Mutt upset.
Take it easy, kid.
Yeah, take it easy.
I wish the audience could see your face right now, Jay, because I know you're like not seriously defending.
No. Well, my point is like this is one of those. I'm trying to reel it in. This is the situation. I knew.
Now that I think about
here.
it is. I can't believe that didn't happen. That's amazing.
But like, this is your opportunity, right? Like, they lose so much making that creative choice. I think this is what's instructive because we've talked a lot about like in the past. The longer you keep the audience ahead of a character, the dumber that character appears, right? And we are ahead of Indiana Jones for like an hour into this movie. We're smarter than Indy for the more than this movie, than like more than half of this movie. And like, imagine if they just they decided that they didn't want to preserve that surprise and they went the Holy Grail route.
Yeah, it's exactly what you're going to say.
He sits down. You have the same exact scene. And he goes, my mom, Marion Ravenwood, has been kidnapped by the Russians. And she said, you're the only person in the world who could find her and find this crystal skull. Immediately, India's fucking locked in. We are locked in. And it holds all the emotional. And that's the thing. That's actually what's happening, except Indy didn't ask that question and she wasn't using her real name.
I know we're not supposed to fix movies, but you just like fixed so much of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
And then he's driven. And look, Jamie, I'll finish my thought because I'm going to forget.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then he could lament about leaving her at the altar, which we learn later in some half-assed, oh, you left me at the altar, like... Then he could be like, fuck, I was terrible to your mom. Like, this is his chance to like reunite with her, not just to save, but to fix his broken relationship with her, just like they did with the father, right? Like, I got to mend these wounds that I created, just like with his father in the past. And it just would have him being driven the entire time by that desire to find her, reconnect with her and bond with her again. That changes the whole thing. And the movie pretty much stays the same. Like, as far as what's happening A to Z, like, it's so crazy to me. But anyway, Jamie, I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh, I know what happened. I know what happened here. So that was the way it was. And then Spielberg went, I just did that in the last movie. I can't do that again. And no
Guaranteed.
teenage daughter either. I don't want that. Make it a boy.
No teenage. I just did that in the Lost World.
I did that. They muddled it up.
You also, you know what? I think you also had him as a filmmaker kind of moving away from genre.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this shows that, you know what I mean? Like he like everything we've talked about, he didn't want to do all that stuff anymore. I think he wanted to do more prestige stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or he was more interested back when this came out, you know.
But by the way, screenplay wise, what we're talking about right now is one of 3 fundamental problems I have with the screenplay. Because this is the launching point. And if this part's confused in your head, or you're confused and you're turned into the, I don't understand, why is he going? I don't get, why are they here? It's like, it is the worst thing to happen. You know, if you can't
in any script, yes.
Yeah. That's
why I thought it was good to bring up, because this is sort of a very basic thing you need to think about, and a lot of people skip past this part.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other things that happen that I don't like about this movie tend to be execution based, tend to be tonal. By the way, I do want to talk about tone in between topics super quick. Are we in between topics?
Okay.
Can I jump to
we're
tone
about to do MacGuffins. So
we're going to do MacGuffins, but talk about tone,
So this movie is tonally silly, right? It's tonally silly in a way that the previous
it's everything
movies,
people don't like about Last Crusade, but
exactly. So, and this was so as a constructive thing, and I know we've talked about tonal meter and stuff like that. One other thing I've used in the past, I don't use it as often because I tend to write my wife's around and my kids around. I like to put music on and write action sequences, and I'll pick a tonal thing that'll just help inspire me, get my juices flowing. This movie, if they did that, they kind of put that slapsticky music on that they put that and every action sequence is done with that music in mind. And that's tonally the issue with,
that's John Williams feeding off that tone. Yeah.
And while that's okay for a sequence or 2, I think the problem with this movie is every sequence is that, and maybe people like me, some of the older Indiana Jones people, that's not the tone we 100% associate with every action sequence in Indiana Jones. Maybe we get one sequence like that or 2,
right?
But it's the change up. It's not the norm. And in this movie, is going through my head the whole time. and I don't want that.
How do we codify that, Jamie?
Man, what do you call that?
Well, it's
the baby elephant score.
You know, pick the right. Basically, it's like when you write, pick the right playlist. That's choose your playlist wisely, as an old Last Crusade knight once said.
That's going to come up again when we talk about the rides.
The tone is a symptom of Spielberg's care about doing this movie, I think, too, right? Because he wanted it to be light. He's not interested in going hard like he used to for genre.
It's funny because I'm really dying to compare it to the next movie because the tones change. And
don't do it, Jamie.
I'm dying to bring up Tintin.
Do it tomorrow. I mean, do it the next one.
Only slightly, though, is the next movie. What I don't like about the next movie is what I don't like about this movie in the opposites. It's strange because the other one's so serious. This one's so silly. And there's kind of like that one almost needs you're a teacher part-time. It needs that. This movie has too much.
It's a great premise delivery. That's a fantastic line.
No, I love that line.
I can't.
But
I just want to mention that the movie that has that tone in the right place is Tintin.
Yeah,
that's the Spielberg that I wanted for this. We got it for some reason in Tintin. Tintin is the best Indy 4.
Well,
so
funny,
anyway,
on the rewatch, I noticed shots from Tintin in this movie. I was like, I see where we're following the car and it's doing the thing, and I was like, that's Tintin. He used that again in Tintin.
Which is a way better written, executed movie than this. Yeah. So is that everything you wanted to say about tone?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Jamie?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, let's talk about maybe the most famous thing about this movie is MacGuffins, right?
Yeah.
Does any we've just talked about MacGuffins
So
before,
I went and I
right?
looked back because we always go like, have we done these topics to death?
Right.
And
We have, of course.
We've only talked about this in 101 episodes 6 times, and the last one was Doctor Strange because they had 2, the Darkhold.
Right,
And I forget the other one. But
The arc light or something. Yeah.
yes. So Jamie, I figured you could revisit with your. We'll wind you up with your MacGuffin spiel and then talk about them all.
Yeah, MacGuffin is a name that Alfred Hitchcock came up with, and it's really the object of interest, the object everybody's chasing after. In Alfred Hitchcock thing, MacGuffins, his suggestion was MacGuffins can be meaningless, and his is almost his definition of it is almost the opposite of the way Lucas treats these MacGuffins. Right? Is like it doesn't matter what they are. It could be the golden scepter of Ra or something. And we're just chasing it. Whereas I know that Lucas stressed over, like Lucas thought the most important thing coming up with an Indiana Jones concept was coming up with the MacGuffin, which is weird for Temple of Doom because that one almost people forget it, right? It's called Temple of Doom. It's not called Indiana Jones and the Shakira.
Right.
What are they?
And the Shakira stones.
Shankara stones.
Yeah.
Shakira.
Hips don't lie. No. Shakira stones. Yeah.
I disagree with Hitchcock a little bit just because like I think that I'm a Temple of Doom guy, but I think that the reason 1 and 3 hit so hard at least in our culture is because of the MacGuffins and what they represent. I think that like the argument that it doesn't matter is not totally true.
Well, I think it's dependent on the concept. Like a couple examples, like the Infinity Stones are everything, right? It's a story engine that like those things are very consequential themselves.
Right.
Whereas in my opinion, the briefcase in Pulp Fiction works well. And it's sort of what's driving everything when it all comes down to it. And we don't know what it is. It doesn't do anything in the story except glow when John Travolta opens it. And so to Alfred Hitchcock's point, it can work in that way too. But I kind of wanted to talk about all of the MacGuffins and compare them just like we compared the call to action. And I'm going to do that sort of throughout the rest of the talking points because I think it's instructive of why one is really like one of the best movies ever, and then why
I actually have a good point I think about this.
So I mean, which one did you want to talk about when I mentioned this?
I wrote a few of my own notes that aren't on the talking points.
Okay.
And one thing I did write, which was a compliment, not something I love, but a compliment, is that like, what they think the MacGuffin will do and then what it actually does. And Raiders, they think that having the arc will give you the power to wield the world.
Right.
And it turns out that isn't true. That's not true. Nobody would ever have been able to wield that thing. Right.
But in their perspective, what's their motivation?
I'm not talking about motivation.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm talking about, yes, the motivation to get there and wield it is part of the movie. What I'm saying is the thing that is similar with Raiders in this is, it's a lie.
Yeah.
It's a lie.
I love that about it.
The skull and whatever the hell you want to call the chamber, it didn't do anything but make her explode. I mean, it was never going to give her the power to like change the minds of nations and stuff. That was all a lie. So in that regard, I'll compliment this MacGuffin in that it's much like Raiders. It was a lie to everyone.
Okay.
Nobody, the people, everyone chasing it had no clue what it actually would do.
Yeah.
Right. I'll say that. That's my compliment.
I kind of wanted to talk about it from sort of an audience engagement, like the emotional experience.
Absolutely.
So, like, let's compare it. The Ark of the Covenant is Indiana Jones's quest to stop an all-powerful supernatural weapon of mass destruction from being used. That's super fucking compelling. It's got the 10 Commandments in it, and supposedly everyone in the story believes you can wield the power of God with it. in your possession. I mean, that's a MacGuffin right there. You know, the stones, they just basically said the quest for fortune and glory, right? It's got diamonds inside. But we do get that extra human element where if he returns it to this village, then their crops will grow again, their water will be healthy, everything will flourish again, or this town full of, this village is dying, and it's up to him to return that. But when it comes down to it, fortune and glory is what he repeats over the course of the story, right?
Well, that's why I like Temple of Doom, because Indy changes.
Yeah, he grows.
He grows.
That's a good call.
That's why it's my favorite.
The Holy Grail is the quest for immortality, right? Like, it's like,
Right.
if even the Nazis want to drink from the cup, and basically they could build an immortal army, you know, with it if they think
They could become more Aryan,
yes,
and perfect than
that's what they think, you know. And again, there's a twist there. There's a twist there that, like, you can't leave the room. Even if you you can be immortal, but you can't
it's
leave
another
the room.
lie. It's another lie.
But for me, so this is what I want to talk about: the Crystal Skull. When it starts, when we learn about it, from Indy's perspective, what is the quest? What's the quest?
To save his old friend.
Yeah, but the quest for the object itself.
Oh! The quest for the is just to.
That's why I'm asking.
I just watched it twice, and I can't give you an answer
because there isn't one.
I just watched it.
We're
twice.
talking about the MacGuffin in an Indiana Jones movie.
Well, he just thinks it's a crystal skull.
Right.
It's just a thing.
It's for a thing of no apparent importance.
It's a magnetic skull.
He doesn't know it's magnetic, though. Like,
well, what about the beginning?
He doesn't know that's a crystal skull.
He doesn't know that's a crystal skull.
Oh, okay.
From his perspective,
right, you're right.
It doesn't even matter. I'm talking about from a story constructing, from an instructive standpoint. If you're out there and you're coming up with your MacGuffin, you can look at Indy 4 as the wrong way to do it. And it isn't until 62 minutes, which I'm going to get to later, that it's revealed that why the Russians want it. That they want to control minds.
Tent, right?
So for an hour of this movie, no one gives a shit about the MacGuffin. It's an object of no importance. It's the Hitchcock version.
He
basically
does know. I mean, not to defend this at all, but he does know that the Russians let Marion mail him the thing, so they're onto it. You know, they're on the hunt or something. He knows
they let her out to mail that letter so I can decipher it.
Yes,
so then
he knows they're hunting.
He doesn't know that's Marion. Also,
he doesn't know that's
Mary.
God in heaven,
some Mary.
So what I'm saying is, and then in the end, and this is another where I'm going with this is the same thing I talked about with the Marion, the call to action, the simple change. What we learn in the end, the twist ending, is all along it was a quest for all-knowing interdimensional knowledge. If everyone in the story knew that what they would actually gain when they got there was all-knowing interdimensional knowledge, that change. Imagine Indiana Jones on a quest for wisdom, for all-knowing. Like if I can, on a quest for an object that instead of eternal life, instead of the power of God, it gives you more knowledge than any human has ever possessed. That feels perfect. That feels like you had it right there. Like, that is a cool.
I would like to point out what I also think the screenwriter was thinking here is, and it goes with that little scene in the library at the end of the car chase, where he says to the kid, which is, I like that scene sort of.
Yeah,
he says to the kid, he's like, if you want to be an archaeologist, you got to get out of the library.
Right.
And so I think that the idea is that there's this intriguing thing happening that he's not really that involved in.
Yeah.
But since he's an archaeologist and this is history, he'll kind of go on the adventure out of sheer interest.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what that means, right? He's like telling everyone, you got to get out of the library. And he, you know what I mean? So he's kind of like, you got to go on adventures, and here's an adventure right in front of me. I might as well go.
I might as well take it.
It's not that compelling, but I think that's what they thought they were doing.
But I think it's instructive to be like, if they had just minded a little further, right?
Sure. Oh yeah, it's bad. I'm not saying it's good.
But they had it. They had it right there. If they had just workshopped it, and after a decade, whatever many years of development, no one said to George, "Hey, George, like, why don't we just take this ending that you want, where it turns out to be all-knowing interdimensional knowledge? Like, why don't we just make that the legend?" Like, you know what I mean? Like,
also when it's finally delivered in the scene, you said 40 some minutes in. It's not
62 minutes.
I'd argue that it's not that compelling of a thing for the audience, because it's like, what she wants to,
it's not measurable.
She wants to like psychically control the world or something. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
That's So
it's too specific and not vague enough. like you know what I mean? In the other movies, they're just looking for all powerful stuff.
Yeah.
They just want all this power. But for her, she's like, I'm going to control the minds and all this. Just like, what? Yeah.
Well, she wants to become Professor X, basically, and they didn't do a good job of conveying that this thing could actually do that. Yeah.
She kind of came up with it on her own.
It's weird.
Like she like thinks that'll happen or something.
Oh, I'll save it.
Oh, okay. Was that everything?
That's everything I wanted to say about MacGuffin. So I think it's instructive.
Jamie too.
Jamie, do you got anything else on the?
No, that's it.
Well, we kind of like that to everything we've been talking about.
I feel like we covered
all the Indy's Quest.
Yeah. But I did want to.
We cover stakes. Did we really cover stakes?
Well,
the lack thereof is.
That's what. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say it's also odd with the stakes. Like even Ox, I'm like, is he worried that Ox is never going to be normal again? It doesn't feel like it in the movie.
Right.
It doesn't feel like a race to save Ox's brain or anything.
No.
You know what I mean? Like,
and I kind of, I'm going to quote the movie here. Okay.
Yeah.
So and then we can move to the next topic. To your point, Bob, to your point. At 91 minutes, so we're well into the movie, they have just escaped the Russians and survived the 3 waterfalls. They get out of the boat and they have the opportunity to just leave and go home, right? And they see the front of the city of Akator.
The crying thing. Right? The crying, yeah.
And Indy says, the skull has to be returned. I'll do it. Nobody else has to come. And Mutt literally says, who cares?
You're right. He does say that. Yeah.
And he says, this brought us nothing but trouble. And Indy says, I have to return it. And Marion says, why you? And he says, because it told me to. And then it cuts to them inside
they all go.
City.
Let's all go anyway. Just for the heck of it.
So there's your, this is what I call,
what does the movie think was him getting told to?
I think what the hypnotism.
When he's looking
the hypnotism
at the
thing?
hypnotism.
Okay.
That's
so badly executed.
He says, return. Mm-hmm. Well, I will say, like, and this is one of those idea versus execution things in the script. That scene where Indy's looking at the skull, the skull, the stuff that's happening on the skull as scripted is way more dramatic, and Indy's face is like turning red, and all the vein on the page, how it's written is all the veins in his face appear and they're bulging and they're throbbing, and it looks like his like head's gonna explode. Indiana Jones as he's looking at this skull, and then they do way more with the guy with the EKG thing that's like his heart thing, and it like breaks like in the script. And so like all of those little things to give you measurable cues that there's like some supernatural thing happening are really dialed down in the execution. Like imagine if it looked like Indiana Jones's head was going to explode, and like I guess Steven Spielberg was,
it would also feel more real, I guess, too.
So
the danger.
But anyway, this is like, Jamie, I don't have like a term for this, but like there's this moment I think that is good in screenwriting where you basically give the audience a status update of the quest, and you have your heroes basically reiterate how they're feeling about the goal, how they're feeling about the stakes and the reward, and how they're feeling about the deadline. And you do it like, we only have 10 minutes to get to this thing and do this thing, and if we don't do it, this person's gonna die, you know? And here it's I gotta do this. And Mutt says, who cares?
Yeah, it's not like we have to do this before midnight tonight or Ox explodes. His head explodes.
And this is literally toward the end of the movie when things should be getting more and more escalated.
Yes,
and it's to the point like, who cares?
He literally says, who cares?
Just throw the thing away and let's get out of here.
And he's the guy that's responsible for them all being there.
That's what I'm saying. So I think it's really instructive that if you get to a point where you're at the end of your act 2 and you have this like your characters are now like giving an update, they're regrouping basically, and they're like, okay, we have to do this thing that we've been trying to do for the entire movie, and you can't find a reason for them to do it.
Yeah,
you need to backtrack and take a hard look at the why here, why now, and the goals, the call to action, and all of those things, and figure out why it is that this doesn't matter as much as it should at this point in the story.
You know what annoys me more too is like, you know, you both know I've already said like there's an argument for Mac not even being in this movie. I think there's a huge argument for it. In this scene that you're talking about, it's odd to me that Mac's not the one that pushes harder to be, because he wants the gold.
You would think that motivation.
That's the function of Mac, and he's not even really doing
it at all.
He doesn't express it at all.
In this moment,
I hate Max. I love Ray Winston as an actor, but I hate Mac as a function of this script.
I just hate it. They needed. I think part of the Indiana Jones recipe is the untrustworthy ally, the double-crossing untrustworthy ally. So I think they were trying to check that audience expectation box, but they just didn't execute.
Yeah, it's very strange. This movie, when you look at it, is definitely picking off the menu of the other movies, you know? So like even the scene where there's a scene that is almost like the X marks the spot scene that happens earlier where he goes up and he looks down, he's like, there, the Nazca lights. You know, there's that scene. There's all kinds of scenes, but this scene, this movie is structured a little bit like Last Crusade in that it ends at getting to the place. You know what I mean? Like that's how Last Crusade ends. Whereas Raiders, they find the thing and then it becomes a chase for the thing. This movie, they get to the place, which is really the ultimate MacGuffin in some ways. And it ends there. But why do they go in there? Why does Indy go in there? He's forced to go in there. You know what I mean? So it solved the problem of, you know, okay, I get that this thing's cool and all, but why don't we go home at this point? You know, things have gotten a little dangerous, and it solves that by making it personal and making him forced to go in. This movie, it's like, oh, we don't even have that. Just send them in. While the bad guys catch up with them later. You know, it's like,
the bad guys are not even like on their tails. They could just go.
Or I don't know. One of them could say, you know, the Russians know like who we are and where we live. We'll never stop running if we don't figure out what you know what I mean? Like. You could almost solve it with just one of them saying, Max saying that, one of them saying the Russians will always find us, so we got to do something.
Yeah.
You know, it's just odd that no one has that.
Or the double.
Who cares?
I mean, I hate to do it, but we're doing it right now. Mac reveals the double crossing there, takes Marion hostage.
Oh my God. Yeah, that would solve.
And then,
oh my God, that would solve it so easy.
We're going for the city of gold, you motherfucker.
Yeah.
And then you
that would solve it so much. Oh my God.
That would solve it. And then you have a reason for the entire third act to happen.
Because he's holding them at gunpoint. He's holding
Marion hostage.
Oh my God.
And both Mutt and Indy will have to work together to save, you know, his love and Mutt's mother. Like, oh my God, it's right there.
You just have to move the double cross scene from inside the temple to outside the temple.
Right, that's it.
That's like literally that would be enough.
You just bump it up a few scenes sooner.
So
God damn it.
That actually was how they shot it. But the problem was Marion smiled the whole time. So they had to edit it out. And they had to change it because
Karen Allen was like,
she couldn't stop
having
smiling.
The time of her life, and he's like, "No, you're supposed to be sad here. You have a gun to your head, but
your son's in danger.
Fun.
Your son could be killed in the next day." You know. Oh man. Okay.
I'm not trying to rewrite it, but the fixes are so simple. If you just have if you're not George Lucas and have a willingness to hear some ideas.
I think it goes with what Jamie and me said at the beginning. They were having too much fun being with each other. They didn't bother making the movie. They were just having too much fun hanging
like
out.
Us talking about Hancock instead of Indy 4.
Instead of Indy 4, right. They were just they enjoyed. Marion couldn't stop smiling because she was just happy.
Having the time of her life. Yeah,
her life,
and good
hanging
for
out with
her, right? Good for her.
Yeah, they got paid. So did we cover? No, we didn't.
No,
Exposition.
I want to talk. I'm sort of just like retracing.
Mr. DNA gone wrong.
Yes, Mr. Exposition, Mr. DNA gone wrong. So I think another way to compare the movies and what the 1, 2, and 3 do well, and what this movie rewatching for me is the worst part of it, like the least craft, is the exposition. And I think it's like the antithesis of the Mr. DNA and the desert of the real in the Matrix. And for anyone who doesn't know, the Mr. DNA is the video in Jurassic Park where they sit down and it's premise specific, and we learn all about how the dinosaurs came to be in this park through this really clever exposition scene that was so well done that, Jamie, you said like you've had meetings where people are like, do the Mr. DNA video version of this, like where people are just trying to replicate that.
Dinosaurs. And
didn't even like, I haven't seen Loki, but didn't even Loki just do that with Loki?
Yeah.
Like
there was an animated character. Yeah.
So
it was very similar. Yeah.
So do you guys like have encyclopedic knowledge? Remember like the Ark mythos scene? Do you remember that in the classroom?
Sure.
Do one of you want to take it so it's not just me talking of how that plays out?
Yeah, well, now
Jamie.
Now that one's an interesting one because in some ways it's just a book, you know, with pictures and stuff like that and drawings on the chalkboard.
Yes.
But it's super compelling the way his enthusiasm and knowledge versus their kind of FBI by the book kind of thing. It has this weird vibe to it that makes it so great. And I don't know that could easily be replicated in another movie. You know, I could see that one being quite boring in some ways. And it was funny because in this movie, when we get to that part where we're talking about the thing, all it is talk. There is no book. There isn't nothing. Let me open up. I was almost half expecting them just to rip off that scene, like him getting confused. And him like, let me boom, and then go through and the drawings and the thing, and like the godly light coming out of the skull's eyes or something. And instead it's just, oh yeah, okay, skull. Yeah, it's a whatever.
You can, Jamie, you can even like hear John Williams' score as they like open up to that page with the illustration or something. It's totally not there. Yeah. Nothing is there.
Yeah. On top of that, it does one of the things that I see a lot in scripts I consult on, which it has double dose a bad exposition scene. So it has
even more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like triple or quadruple, but it does like, it's like the bar scene. Then we get a little action. Then they come right back to doing another, just, here's another piece of exposition and then another piece of exposition. So it's just like exposition. And on the rewatch, especially maybe when I was watching at the Senator years ago, I paid attention to that. But in the rewatch, I was just like, blah, 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 get to the thing, whatever. I just was not, it totally checked me out. And I couldn't believe that they didn't recognize, hey, this is a boring exposition scene with hardly any conflict, no Pope in the pool, kind of
you're
thing.
Talking about the guy who created the Force.
Yes.
Like,
right.
That's a really hard thing to conceptualize.
So yeah.
No, Jamie, to your point. So yeah, it's actually 6 scenes, Jamie. There are 6 scenes of exposition about the crystal skull that are broken up in tiny little chunks over an hour. So it's like the equivalent of taking the Mr. DNA video and every so often giving us another 10 seconds of that video, and then here's another scene and we get another 10 seconds of that video, and an hour into learning about the Mr. DNA video, here's the last 10 seconds of that video. Or imagine if the Desert of the Real, if like every time Neo like went to eat that slop, they like put some goggles on his face and like he got to see a little bit more of like, we call this, like, do you see the woman in the red dress? That's your lesson for today. And then he goes like an hour later, they put him on the roof. Okay, can you jump to the other side, right? If all of that took place over the course of an hour in 6 different scenes, it wouldn't work. So I just think it speaks to like go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, going back to Raiders. So in that one scene, you establish the power of the arc, the praise of the killer kind of speech, what the arc is, who the bad guys are, what the stakes are, Abner Ravenwood, how to find it. All of that is in one scene.
And it's like 3 minutes long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that this is another example that if you're trying to, I think you can learn from bad execution, right? Like I think some of the best lessons can be learned from movies where it's like you have the comparables, the same team, right? And they did it right. And the same goes, everything that you just described, Jamie, the same goes for that Grail scene, that scene in the room where he's deciphering the tablet. You learn what the situation is, what the goal is, what the stakes are, what the reward is, what the deadline is to get it all happens in a 3.5-4 minute chunk. And you don't need to keep and we know everything. And there's visual accompaniment, right? It's the tablet. Right. And they do this great thing where he's talking about the drinking from the cup, where he pours the glasses of wine of white wine into the glasses. There's all this texture that makes it interesting. So you can imagine drinking like this. There's just so much craft.
Not to mention John Williams there.
But there's so much craft.
I'm very specific about the scores.
And here we have, it's literally talking heads for 6 different scenes with no visual accompaniment.
And I still don't, having watched it twice in the last 2 days, I still don't really know what those exposition scenes were trying to tell me about what I'm going to get, because what we got, I don't even understand what happened. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't even, it's not even in the same universe of what the exposition was trying to say.
Jamie, in the bar scene, to your quadruple thing that you were talking about, when you read you read this in scripts all the time, right? I do too. Yep. Here's what we get. And it's literally just Mutt sitting at a table talking to Indy. And they try to do a Pope in the pool where he puts the comb in the soda glass, but then it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's not much. It's just like a little thing, But I
liked the greasers versus the preppies.
Yeah,
I like that.
I like the end of
that's
it.
A fun thing.
I think that's great. I love that fight, but that doesn't happen until the end. But
it also doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. No, but we get the in this scene, we get the Ox story. Then we get the Crystal Skull beginning of it backstory. Then we get the Akator backstory. Then we get Mutt's relationship with Ox backstory. Ox is a great guy. He read to me when I was a kid. He told me stories. Then we get Mutt's mom backstory. All of that is just him sitting at a table, just dumping one thing after the other. And that's like the opposite of what you need to do.
Well, I mean, there are craft level ways to fix this. Like the bad example would be, let's say the bad guys closed in on them earlier and they had to cause a fight. And then when they're driving, they start talking about the stuff or something,
Oh my gosh, that's the Pope in the pool version.
Yeah.
My mom, like he's on
Terminator.
They could talk about it during the action scene. Yeah, right.
Who's your mom?
There's so many different ways, but the simplest way is to follow Raiders and just make it more visual, and hell, rehash that scene because it's a great scene and reminds us with the music and all that stuff. Steal from yourself.
Do it with alien paint. That's all you need to do. Do it with alien paint. You got some like saucer on the ceiling that's like, the light dome. of the light fixture.
Every James Bond movie has the scene where he talks to M and he throws the hat on the thing and they talk, and it's just part of the thing.
Can I also point out that if the fix that Jimmy talked about with Marion Ravenwood being the impetus for him to get involved, I think you could also cut Ox out completely as a character.
If it's just her.
Yeah, like you don't need this Ox guy that like they care. You know what I mean? Also, Mutt would care about his mom. You don't need this third person here.
They needed the riddles, though. I know they were trying to do the riddles that they just did in Last Crusade. Like
they should have just given that up. They should have given that up. It wasn't interesting. That doesn't do anything. They could have figured a different way.
I agree.
It's awful. You got John Hurt, one of the greatest living actors at the time, doing nothing and just they're babysitting him.
Henry Jones Jr.
But the exposition to explain Ox also wouldn't have to be there.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like,
no, I know.
Once we know that Mary Raven is his mom, that's all we need to know.
It's right there. It's right there.
It's so easy.
And it's one of these things that if you break out your scenes and index cards and you say, do I have conflict? Does it move the scene forward? This is kind of how you massage out these exposition scenes. It's the best way to figure out an exposition scene is make a list of all your scenes, say, what's the conflict in the scene? Then say, how does the scene move it forward? And you can figure it out because most of these scenes don't have conflict. I mean, you can argue to yourself, well, the conflict is Indy doesn't want to talk to this mud guy, but it's not real conflict. So then you can dig into like, what's real conflict and try to figure it out. And you could see an example of this. I kind of hate the scene because it's circular. It doesn't move the story forward. It just delivers the exposition. You can see this done in the quicksand scene. The quicksand scene, which drives me nuts because Shia just punches somebody and they run into the quicksand.
It looks bad too. It looks awful. I know we're a script podcast. It just looks terrible. It looks like a shot from Family Matters when they were in the woods. That's how bad it looks. I'm sorry, Jamie.
Of all the things in the movie, it stands out to me as like the part I hate the most in some ways because it is really bad. And then to throw the snake to him and all that stuff, it's just so stupid and dumb and it goes on for too long. But the whole purpose of it is like if it was on an index card, the index card would be Indy finds out Mutt's his son. And they were like, well, okay, well, what's a scene that can do that? Instead of just having the two people talk in a tent, he's your son, you know?
Yep, that's your Pope in the pool.
They tried to construct a scene with even though it's my most hated scene. But it's kind of the example of doing that or trying to do it. Now that scene is so circular.
Yeah,
that scene is so circular is what drives me crazy because he punches them, they escape, but then they're immediately captured again right after it. So it's like, why do we even do this? You know, it's like, what's the point? But
I'll say this: look, the one positive, Jamie, is when he learns Mutt is his son, and his first response is, "Why didn't you make him go back to school?"
Right.
I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I hate the rest
that.
of it.
Yeah.
I hate the rest of everything happening.
And then,
I like that they found a clever way to bury that exposition. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They did find a way. It's an example of trying to find a way, like or something. It is an example of that.
They did the work. Yeah.
They did the work.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I think this pod doing this is making me dislike it a little bit more.
I know. I felt bad. Like when I was doing it, I was like, I'm liking it less.
Like once again, I think if it had less meaning in our lives, it wouldn't matter. If it was like the Mummy 5, like whatever, who gives a crap? You know, like if the action scene's cool, you know what I mean? But this feels like heartbreaking a little bit. Villains. We did talk about the villain construction and the plan.
Again,
and we sort of covered it a little bit,
but I just kind of want to. Let's talk about Belloc first. What is the famous Belloc speech?
You are the same. We are the same. You and I.
We are the same.
Yep.
Yes. What would you say about this villain whose name I can't even remember, even though I just watched?
It's called Kate Blanchett.
Kate Blanchett.
That's the name. That's the name of the villain.
Kate Blanchett with a Russian accent. How would you describe her villain construction? Like,
can I cover this a little bit?
Do it.
I'd say Belloc is obviously, there before the grace of God goes I of Indy, right? Like the two of them, while they live different paths, they are very much the same as far as their interest in it. When it comes to Kate Blanchett, and he doesn't know what the hell's going on.
He doesn't even. Right.
He doesn't even know. He doesn't know what the hell's going on. She tells him what she's interested in. He doesn't. He's like,
She gives him a vague. She doesn't tell him what she's interested in.
Yeah, she gives him a vague explanation. The only way to get him on any remote level as her is she has to implant it in his brain, I guess, from what you're saying, Jimmy. What happened there? I still, you know what I mean? Like, they have no connection. There's nothing between them
no
that is even
parallels
at all.
Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't listened to our previous 100 episodes, one thing we talk about is when you're constructing a villain, a great way to force growth and change in your hero and to give them an adversary that is compelling for the audience to watch is to make them basically like a circus mirror version. Like if and basically they're a couple steps away from becoming that villain. And like if Luke Skywalker makes all the wrong choices, he's Darth Vader. If Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark makes all the wrong choices, he becomes Belloc. He's not that far away from Belloc. Here, he
would never become her.
There's
ever.
And that's what makes the quest so compelling because he has sort of this intellectual equal that maybe he's not a physical equal, but this guy has the power to one-up him. He shares a lot of the same knowledge and skill sets that make Indy who he is. And here we're like, you would basically have to make Indy like a psychic in training.
What makes that moment with Belloc compelling too is like you want to know what's here just as much as me. That's like the most compelling line in Raiders, in my opinion. Nothing like that could be said in this movie.
Yes,
because nobody seems to care that much about the Crystal Skulls except her,
and
she's kind of the one that cares, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone else is kind of Luke on it. Right?
Yeah, and so this is my second point to now that we're sort of on. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something, and you guys were going to be like, Jimmy, you missed this whole thing where she said you and I are the same, and she talked about how her dad was like an archaeologist and blah blah. I'm like, oh, I checked out. I missed that, but so there's another aspect to this recipe for drama, right? And that is that it's a dangerous game when you're writing a script and you keep the villain's plan a mystery. When we don't know what the villains want or why, and it's hard to root for the heroes to overcome them, right? And in contrast, we know right from the start, from that teacher scene, from that exposition scene we just talked about in Raiders, that it's the Nazis, it's Hitler's army. And we know exactly what they want, the Ark, and we know exactly what's going to happen if they get it before Indy does. And the same goes for there's different versions of that in Temple of Doom, and there's different versions of that with the Holy Grail. They all sort of had that same story DNA where we know who the villains are, what the villains want, and what happens if they get it. And it's really high stakes. Here, we know she wants that box, but we don't know what's in the box. And we don't know why she wants it, what's going to happen when she gets that thing she wants. And it isn't until 63 minutes, so more than 50% through this movie, that we even know what her plan is. That psychic, we're going to control the minds of international mind control. Imagine how this script changes, how the experience of watching the movie changes if in the opening scene we learn, or whatever, way sooner, we learn that the Crystal Skull, they believe, has the power for international mind control, right? If we knew that from the start, then finding the Crystal Skull before the Russians do takes on way more importance, takes on way more urgency, takes on way more stakes. But the fact that we don't learn, so it's just, I read a lot of scripts where the villain's plan is a mystery. And I'm like, why is the bad guy doing what they're doing? And they're like, well, I didn't want to tell the audience until the end. And you're like, oh, okay. Anyway, what were you going to say, Bob?
Jamie pointed this out earlier, that the scene where he's talking to the guys about World War II and the FBI scene is superfluous. It doesn't come back. That seems like a perfect breakdown of
right there.
Praise of the
That's
Killer
your
for
teacher
Kate
scene,
Blanchett,
right? That's your classroom scene from
Right, like-
Raiders, right there.
to warn him about Russian
They're
movements
in-
because they think he's involved because they said, "Do you know this woman?"
Yeah.
And then describe her, say what she's into mind control or something. That seems like the moment to make that scene not superfluous, and it's just not there. There's nothing.
Basically, they made a decision that Indy was going to be solving a mystery about what the MacGuffin is, and
it is kind of a whodunit.
and that choice makes it really less compelling. Like it's a very deliberate choice. So, anyway,
I'm just that scene is useless.
Yeah. It isn't until the cave, the burial chamber, which is like an hour in, it's right before the camp scene, where he goes, "Wait, crystal isn't magnetic." And then he's like, "This couldn't have been made by human hands." And he says, now all of a sudden he's intrigued. What is this? And he's like, "This thing is fucking crazy." And he's suddenly interested in the MacGuffin, but that's like an hour in. Anyway.
Yeah, okay. The head scratchingness of it all is really what's amazing.
I almost feel like what they were chasing, and it's almost like a patch. Is
Jamie's
that
so
scene,
tired by thinking about it.
Yeah, it's that scene where they were staring into the skull. That was almost like a Deus Ex Machina of motivation in a weird sort of way, or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes.
It could have been, and maybe like to me, the way I'd probably fix it is Spalko had looked. Is that her name, Spalko?
I think so.
I don't remember having watched it twice.
Maybe
I can't tell you.
I even scrolled through the script.
Like I could almost see a version where she had an alien encounter, an interdimensional encounter earlier in her life, and she looked into the eyes of one of these things and then implanted things. So she got a little like Oxley or whatever, or the Ox. So maybe she could have been the middle version. Like that's what happened if you stare too long. She's the middle version.
Yes.
And she wants Indiana to stare into its eyes so she can understand what she's after, and it's kind of a Deus Ex Machina. Anyway, I'm rewriting the whole thing.
You're rewriting, but can I point something out? Is this you could almost have established her in that way, Jamie, if we didn't waste time with an opening scene with a car chase that literally gives us nothing.
Oh my gosh!
It does so nothing. It angered me this time actually watching it. The whole. I understand it's introducing us to the 50s and everything. But that's time that could have been used to establish things like this. And those characters, they never come back. It doesn't say anything about the Russian characters. It's just a waste of fucking time completely. And if you're going to say, well, it's introducing us to the 50s, I think that the rest of the movie does that just fine.
Yeah. Well,
we don't need that.
George Lucas loves his car chases, man.
I know, but what does that opening have to do with anything?
I know.
That's time that could be cut or used to establish her as a kid seeing what Jamie just said. Seeing
having an alien encounter.
Or something like that.
Yeah. An international being encounter.
Or an interdimensional being. Whatever the hell it is, right? It's just like time that like with the FBI scene. There's so much here that you could just like excise.
Yes.
The movie could just start somewhere else. Anyway.
Oh my god. Okay.
I didn't think this would be this harrowing of a breakdown. You want to talk about the brainstorming the rides in your movie's amusement park?
I put this on there for Jamie. I wanted to hear Jamie's. Yeah.
And I think this speaks to it a little bit. So we talk about like premise delivery, and if you're making like Jurassic Park, a movie about clone dinosaurs, like how do you figure out the set pieces? Like, what are the big scenes? How do you whiteboard? And one of the things Jimmy and I have talked about in the past is almost thinking of it like a theme park. Like, what are your rides? What are your rides in this theme park? What would be what comes to your mind immediately? You know, what would be the things that
the perfect franchise for this question, right?
Yes, it's built on this.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. And it you know, in Raiders, I think the premise was the old serials. You know what I mean? It was like, what kind of scenes happen in the old serials if they were about archaeology and treasure hunting versus the Nazis. What would come up? And they kind of brainstormed some stuff, and even had extra stuff like the mine chase that they saved for the next movie, or even the Shanghai sequence, which they saved for the next movie. So they came up with all these
chase too. Yeah.
The boat chase. They came up with all these things from their past, from their history of these kind of franchises, and put it up on the board. Again, as time went on, I think that, Temple of Doom, they had brainstormed from a different series of movies. And then maybe they started to have to dip back in the well with Last Crusade. And you kind of saw that. The tank chase was a little similar. It was almost like they start borrowing from themselves a little bit more. This movie, however, I do think has premise paint, as we call it. I think it has two premise paint. Premise paint is just kind of premise ideas that you can sprinkle over your action set pieces to make them feel different. So you take a car chase, sprinkle over some 1950s premise paint, and maybe it ends up like the 1950s cars and things like that. Maybe it ends up
to the campus. Yeah.
Right.
The greasers scene, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think the 50s, nuke the fridge, Area 51, all that stuff kind of comes from a mix of the 50s and some of the
alien
UFO
stuff.
premise, the alien premise piece. The UFO in the end would, in my mind, I'd be writing alien encounters, crystal skulls. You'd put up there UFOs probably, which kind of happens in the end, but I guess they're interdimensional, so that doesn't count. And then the ancient alien stuff, the Nazca lines, and that hints at a location. All these other things are kind of up for grabs. Now, what we've learned from the Mission Impossible movies is that's how they write the movies. They just come up with the set pieces, and then somebody else comes in later and ties them together. Sometimes this movie, I think that's what it feels like. It feels like they came up with a bunch of set pieces and they held on to them and never killed their darlings.
Ooh, yes.
So it was like, let's keep that nuclear scene because that's a darling. I want to keep that. I want to see Indiana Jones with it doesn't totally make sense. It's kind of outside its
and I kind of want to bounce off of that real quick, and then we can go back to it because you were on a roll.
Sure.
So this is, to your point, the killing the darlings and sort of like, I gotta get this idea in there somewhere. Do you guys remember? And I sent you the link, so maybe I don't know if you read the link I sent right before this with the storyboards to the original draft of Back to the Future. Okay, when we did the Back to the Future episode, we talked about the old drafts.
Right.
Now, in the original draft, remember, Spielberg was involved in the development of Back to the Future. Like, he's a producer on it. He's friends with Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. He was part of that brain trust for Back to the Future. The climax of the original Back to the Future, it wasn't a DeLorean. It was a water heater. Oh. It was a water heater. And then the climax of the original Back to the Future is they drive the water heater in a truck to a nuclear test site while there's a nuclear bomb scheduled to go off. And they retrofit the water heater to a lead fridge so that Marty can get in the lead fridge and get on the back of a truck, and then Doc puts a brick on the pedal and has Marty drive into the nuclear explosion in the back of the truck in a fridge, and Marty goes to 1985 and comes out of the fridge surviving a nuclear blast. And there's even in the storyboards, Marty walking through this town and into houses. There's in the storyboards, there's a shot of Marty between two people on a couch that they actually used in Indiana Jones. So to your point, Jamie, it's that was on Spielberg's whiteboard in 1984. And he was we gotta do this at some point, right? It doesn't matter if it has nothing to do with aliens. We got it, holding on to those darlings. And sometimes that's to a detriment. So it's just, I just wanted to include that.
Yeah.
Spielberg needed to do that.
So the movie has nothing to do with nuclear power or anything. It is nothing.
Right.
No,
sorry, Jamie.
It's just, Cold War era. So let's throw the nuke in there, and there are ways to thematically tie it to that, to do something, but it doesn't even really try. It just kind of patches it on to the end of another action sequence. And then you had the then you had the killer ants. We already talked about how that was kind of a holdover from a previous script.
Yes.
And the killer ants, I kind of think the idea of it is kind of interesting. And the kill is, again, it's one of the few tonally darker kind of kills in the movie.
That's the Temple of Doom moment, man, when he dies.
The problem with that, there's a lot of problems with that whole scene. But
there is. It's still my favorite scene.
When you tack on a chase and the monkeys and the Tarzan stuff, and then that, and it keeps going on and on and on. It really becomes almost to a spoofy level because it's like one after another. So anyway, you do have to kill these darlings, and then there's some darlings like the 3 waterfalls. The waterfalls, to me, like, put that in a boat chase or something. Don't just have them. It's almost like a joke.
Just have them fall.
Yeah. The joke is almost like, oh, another one. Oh, and I think that joke only works if there's like 20 waterfalls. Like, they keep going down. It says like, 30 minutes later. Oh,
30 times it drops.
30 times.
You guys remember the windshield, right? I'm not crazy, right? Like, you remember the windshield, right?
Yes.
I don't remember it bugging me though. I don't remember it.
It's a giant sharp piece of glass that's right in front of him. Anyway,
it's so like pointlessly like, oh well, they have waterfalls and adventures, so we'll just throw that in there, kind of thing, and it's 3 times, and it's kind of a gag.
Also,
I guess I don't know.
I don't know what to say about this thing, but I think surviving death ridiculously you have to space it out, and in that span of that movie, they don't die so many times. Like Cate Blanchett doesn't successfully push the car off the cliff, and then they survive driving the car off the cliff, and then they survive 3 waterfalls, and it's like, stop, you do this once every 45 minutes, not once, not like 5, 6, 7 times in 10 minutes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's, you can't have that many amusement park rides at once.
Yeah, there's too many rides. You can't ride. You don't have it's sort of riding too many rides. You get on another one, you don't feel the same that you just felt on the past 3 because you've exhausted those feelings, that wave. I think to your point, yeah, Jamie, like there's a danger of like the whiteboard is really important and a lot of people don't do it, but there's also the danger of like you have to be selective of all those ideas and what's going to fit the concept best. And I think in the previous 3 movies, they did a really good job of finding a way to make them all like more like premise related, and they feel appropriate and they feel like they're the right ideas to be on there. And they didn't learn from their past mistakes, which is not mistakes. They didn't learn from their past successes, which is where they recognize like the tunnel chase doesn't work in Raiders. The boat chase doesn't work in Raiders. We gotta just, they kept it. They used it for something else. Here, they saw all that. Let's do all the ideas. Let's just do them all.
I mean,
the monkeys, fuck it.
This is a guy who literally didn't do a riverboat chase scene in Jurassic Park, and they turned it into a ride, an actual ride. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like they took that idea and actually turned it into a different medium.
The riverboat chase is my favorite part in the Jurassic Park book too. Anyway,
well, I'm just saying, like they killed that darling and then used it, not even just in another movie, is another medium franchise. Completely in the same franchise, right? Like, but here it feels like Jamie said, it just they wouldn't refuse to.
But yes, the power of killing your darlings, yes, and the danger of not being willing to do so, yeah.
The next and last point we have excites me as a Temple of Doom man.
This is Jamie's point.
I know, but it's a good one. What does Indy learn in this one? Does he arc? Are there things that need fixing? Do they get fixed?
Yeah. And I don't know that there really is a good things that need fixing in this movie. Destiny does a much better job, as we'll talk about maybe some future date, of doing this. But in this movie, the only thing I can see, he gets fired from his job,
and life has taken away 2 of his mentors, his father and
his relationships,
and Marcus. Yeah,
he has a relationship problems. Yeah.
he's older and lonelier.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really
act like it or
express
anything.
anything about that loneliness.
And the movie doesn't seem to show that.
And he
Except-
doesn't seem to have a flaw, which like he's not doing something the wrong way. You know what I mean?
No,
like
the college unjustly fires him. He's a good teacher.
In fact, he seems more complete in this movie than any of the other movies. Because he's kind of he's teaching and he likes it. He's kind of good to Mutt, who's kind of, hey pal, he's kind of like the mature figure to him.
He's also a decorated war hero now. Like he has nothing in life to prove anymore. He is a good just man who's been involved in some incredible things.
Yeah.
You know?
And while he does miss his dad and stuff or something, we really don't know that. We just know it because we would miss our dad, and it's Sean Connery.
Well, there's the scene. There is the scene where he's like looking at the picture. So there's that.
I mean, basically, the most emotion we get comes from the Jim Broadbent line that you quoted earlier. Like that's pretty much the extent of being able to connect with Indy there.
And then a movie like this, what you'd really expect is his flaw would be somehow related to leaving Marion behind, which we've already done in a previous movie. So it's hard to retread the same thing unless you have a new place to go with it. But really,
he's not lamenting that before Mutt shows up, though.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Marion wasn't even on his mind.
No.
He doesn't lament about it once he learned.
No, he's not like, I've been alone all these years. He didn't even say that. He's just like, oh, you're back. Great.
Yeah.
So, once she's there, they kind of settle in. They're not really, there's some silly kind of he's going back to school kind of stuff, but that's nothing else.
Honestly, I think like Marion forgiving him, Marion taking him back because the interdimensionals are gone. I'm like, why is she all? Let's have sex now. I don't. What's happening?
What did we learn? What did he learn to get to that spot?
They went through a bunch of monkeys swinging and waterfalls, and now they're okay. I don't know what's happening. They didn't talk about it really.
And it reminds me of, again, like a script I might consult on that sort of is going through the motions of that, but doesn't really dig in and figure out what's at the crux of it.
It's checking the story box versus earning the moment. Yes. Doing the work, the growing pains in between to earn that healing, to earn that relationship healing. And I hear you, Jamie.
Yeah.
Well, why do they get back together? And the answer is that Marion showed up.
That's it.
There's not like a emotional.
He doesn't apologize.
No,
he doesn't even apologize.
He doesn't really apologize for anything. And it's just sort of it's that thing we talk about too, like a character having more information.
Yep.
At the end of a movie doesn't mean there's
not an arc.
I don't think there's anything about Indy that is different in his mind or his personality by the end of this.
Yeah.
He does have new information about his life. He has a kid now, but it doesn't mean he's different.
Yeah, no.
At all. The reason they get together, it's just not there. It's just not there.
I mean, I'm gonna assume Destiny plays with some of this. I haven't seen it yet, and I know you guys do. Like, gives us some things that need.
But
fixing.
this makes Destiny worse. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't really care that they got back together, and I don't care what Destiny does with it either. I'm just like, this all doesn't matter to me. In fact, it's too much like real life. You know what I mean? It's not movie like at all. It's just like, because there are people that just like don't see each other for years and then see each other and just start dating again for no reason. It's too realistic almost. It doesn't have any magic or explanation to it.
Yeah. It's like, and again, there is a bit of how many times are we going to go back to he's on the outs with Marion, he gets back with Marion.
It's happened 3 times technically, I guess.
Yeah.
No spoilers, I guess, but
sorry.
Sorry, Jamie.
That's okay. I had a feeling.
Yeah.
It's a weird one. It's a weird one. But I mean, when you're looking at arc and things like that, you look at that things that need fixing. So that's the thing in the ordinary world that would happen, that would set up like, here are the problems in his life. And he does have problems. They're usually related to flaws. In this case, they are not related to flaws.
Yeah.
It's that, he's been labeled a commie or something, and he's getting fired, and again he misses his mentors. But yeah, it's
and
really,
there's no old way, new way.
Nope.
There's no photo finish where you measure an old way doing some things related to that flaw wrong, then changing and doing it there's none of that.
there's
He's
no
kind of-
obsession, or
Right.
he's not obsessed with getting the
No.
thing for fortune and glory. He's not, the reasons, his motivations are murky to go in the first place. But if anything, they seem like he's going above and beyond helping this kid Mutt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I was gonna say, I think the word we should use for this is Indy's comfortable.
Yeah,
He's old, and his
maybe
dad
I'll
is
go
dead,
teach
but
wherever.
I mean,
No.
he just seems like a guy who has lived a full life, and he's not
Yeah.
ashamed of himself.
So
He's fine.
I'll throw a curve. I'll throw a curveball at this that I didn't do a lot of deep thinking on, but maybe Mutt was the one that was supposed to have the arc, because he starts out as the grumpy, the blah blah blah. Now he doesn't learn anything either or anything else, but that scene with the hat and the end, I don't know. Maybe they were going at like Mutt's going to be the one that arcs in some ways. Like he
Interesting.
goes from being a Mutt to Henry or whatever. Henry Jr.,
I wonder if we watched it from that angle, if that tracks at all. That's interesting, because we talked
does.
Back to the Future. George is the one who changes. Marty doesn't change. So, and
Does
maybe,
anyone
right.
change in this movie?
That's Mutt is the only one I'm thinking might change a little bit.
He grows.
He grows,
Yeah.
sort of, but
Sort
it's
of.
not really readable. I don't feel like it doesn't read that well. We're doing it for a script podcast, but I don't think it's readable to the audience in any way.
Yeah, that's
I-
interesting.
I think the fact that he gave himself a name, he doesn't use his old name, sort of like Indiana. He's quick to anger in the beginning, not that necessarily changes in the end. He sort of accepts the fact that Indiana Jones is his father very easily, though. He's like, oh, whatever, I don't care.
He
Indy
doesn't.
accepts it too,
He
easily.
avoids
Yeah.
responsibility because he skipped school. That's there. Yeah.
It's just not. I mean, listen to us talking right now.
We're grasping.
It's so hard in your mind to sift through the muck to find any of it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it happens, and I think that's one of the reasons that I personally don't attach to this movie very much. I do find it more fun than I used to, but obviously I like Temple of Doom for a reason, and this is like the opposite for me. I'm just like at the beginning, I'm like, he's a good dude. He's had an incredible life, and he seems pretty satisfied. If they didn't fire him, I think he would just be happy teaching and
talking about archaeology.
He just seems like he's content, and we're like shitting on his life by making him do more stuff. He didn't even need Marion. That's the biggest thing we've pointed out. He didn't need her.
He wasn't.
It's fine.
Measurably feeling bad about.
Yeah, it wasn't like that. He lost the love of his life, and ever since he's been mired in this funk or something like that.
Yeah,
it's not.
He didn't say to Jim Broadbent, "There's the one that got away," and he's looking at her picture,
and he's like,
he's looking at his dad's picture.
Yeah,
he's lamenting his father being dead, and there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah,
Ox, can I remind you that Ox doesn't turn out to be a father figure or something for him either.
He's just some guy he used to be friends with 20 years ago. Mike, this guy played baseball with my high school team. I sure do hope he's doing okay.
We're at the end, and I just wanted to say my biggest thing with this movie that I know you guys aren't as on board with is there's just too many characters. There, two of these people in the main thing should have been cut completely, in my opinion. Ox and Mac do not need to be in this movie at all. They just don't.
Agreed.
They just don't. 3 at the most for an adventure film. It's just too many people, and they're not doing nothing to do.
Standing around doing nothing.
Mac has nothing to do. He's an annoyance. It doesn't make any sense, and Ox is even more useless. It's just
I want to see the version where he takes her hostage right before the city.
I think one day with AI, we'll be able to do that. We'll just be able to input
Jamie,
this.
you saw dial. You can do it now.
Exactly. We input this. We just type a couple commands in to change it, and it gives us the movie that's slightly different. Plus, I can put myself in as a cameo. All those things. Or I can put myself as
Jamie,
This is definitely the lesson we want to learn from
You
this.
could be the one smiling while you're like flying down the waterfall. It could be your face smiling.
I'll just say have Jamie Nash play Marianne, and I'll let it run. And it'll do it.
You know how bad her performance is that Jamie, your like favorite movie of all time is Raiders, and you're the first one of us to jump on her performance.
Aww.
No, it's
so
true
bad.
though.
So but
yeah.
I mean, we're spoiling again, but I think it gets better in the next movie.
That's good.
She does better.
Okay.
I mean, not a huge role, but
don't tell me.
Yeah, no spoilers. We'll definitely be talking about Crystal Skull a little bit again. I feel like that's going to happen. Man, what this is okay, we're done.
Epic. This is as long as Jaws.
This no one thought we would ever we didn't when we came up with doing this, we were all like, oh man. It's a mouthful.
This is insane that it was this long.
This is also a movie that Spielberg half apologized for. So you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not saying anything new. It's everything. Is there anything you guys want to plug, say, anything?
Jamie?
There is a YouTube video of our Save the Cat super panel out there. So if you throw it in your Google machine, you'll find it. Just write Save the Cat super panel or look on savethecat.com and you can find it through there.
Cool. I will check that for sure. I wanted to say I'm going to start doing this regularly. If you have any follow-up questions about this episode, or you have, just any topics in general that you want to hear us talk about the craft, questions about that, email us at writersblockbusterspodcast@gmail.com. We got an email from after me sharing it last time, so that's cool. Maybe we'll get more.
And I say it's any questions you have.
Yes, any questions.
Like if you want to know what Jamie eats for lunch.
Yeah.
We'll cover it at the end of the episode. Hell
yeah.
We can do that.
I love it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. I think that's everything, guys. I watched Crystal Skull twice in a row. That's praiseworthy of itself. Okay. Thank you everybody for listening.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Hey, this is Bob Rose, and thank you for listening to Writers Blockbusters. If you'd like to financially support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. I've been producing the podcast for several years completely out of pocket, and I'd like to keep producing it ad-free and no longer at a loss. If you'd like to help, head on over to patreon.com/Bob Rose Sucks. That's right, Bob Rose Sucks. And if you want the one and only Jimmy George to help polish up that writing project you're kind of struggling with, head on over to scriptbutcher.com. As a listener, you already know he's the best there is, scriptbutcher.com. You can also support the show by simply sharing it or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate both. Thank you for listening and see you next episode.